The last thing I do on earth is write a bond for a man I know will run. His sister signs as cosigner. She puts her house on the line for a brother who has jumped twice, and I let her, because that is the business. My father's rule is stitched into the wall behind me on a cheap plaque. Never write a bond you cannot collect. I take her keys, I touch the deed, I feel the paper between my fingers the way he taught me, and I look at the clock over the door. 4:12 in the afternoon. The office smells like burnt coffee. Somebody is arguing about a tow bill in the parking lot. Then the floor is gone, and I am on my hands and knees on white rock. It is not sand. It is limestone, scoured pale, cut with grooves like something enormous dragged its nails across it. There are no trees. There are holes. Round holes in the ground, some the size of a dinner plate, some big enough to swallow a truck, and the wind coming out of them is warmer than the air. My watch says 4:12. It will say 4:12 for the rest of this story. A voice arrives inside my skull with no volume and no accent, and it is not a God's voice. It is the voice of a statement of account. Day 1 of the first term of the 9th advance. Welcome to antimony. You are recorded in the Chalk Marches, Ward 11, as holder of parcel 41. Your file is open. Your file has always been open. 12,000 people wake up on this world at the same second. I find that out later. What I know in the first minute is that a panel has unfolded in front of my eyes like a page torn out of a ledger, and my name is at the top of it, and every line under my name is bad. Silas Merritt. Talent, debtor, grade F, balance negative, no grant issued. Under that, the arithmetic. Advance, 500 chits, issued to every registered holder. Applied to arrears on parcel 41. Arrears standing, 1,700. Balance carried forward, minus 1,200 chits. I read it 3 times. I have read 1,000 statements in my life, and I know exactly what this one is telling me. Somebody was here before me. Somebody ran up a bill on this dirt, and the bill did not die with him, and the world has handed it to the next warm body through the door, and the 500 that everybody else is holding in their fist right now went out of my account before I ever saw it. Then the sky does the thing that will make me hate the first day for as long as I live. The system reads the grants aloud, not to me, to everyone. It is the only broadcast it will ever make with any warmth in it, and it goes on for 9 minutes. Grant registered, Ward 4, 300 hectares of standing timber and 1 river frontage. Grant registered, Ward 9, iron seam assessed at 11,000. Grant registered, Ward 11, Highmark, 200 hectares of old pine and 1 working quarry, granted to Verity Calloway, free and clear in perpetuity. Congratulations, no ground rent shall attach. Free and clear. In perpetuity. I am sitting in the middle of a burned field of tree stumps, listening to a woman 5 kilometers north, being told she will never owe anyone anything, ever, and the wind out of the holes in the ground is blowing warm on the back of my neck. Then the leaderboard opens, and I learn the second rule of this world, which is that here your account is public, all of it. Every holder can see every other holder's net worth, the way you can see the weather. 12,000 names ranked by what they are worth. Calloway sits at the top with 92,400. The bottom of the list is a wall of small honest numbers. 400, 380, 212. Then there is a line at the very bottom, written in the same clean hand as all the rest, and it is the only one on the entire board with a minus sign in front of it. 12,000 of 12,000. Silas Merritt, minus 1,200. The chat starts before I have finished reading my own name. Somebody in Ward 3 asks how a man manages to go bankrupt on the first morning of a new world. Somebody else says he did not know you could get a negative. Then a man from my own ward, a Gothard whose name I do not have yet, types the thing that sticks to me for 11 days. Arrears boy. I want to say I have a plan in that moment. I do not. I sit on a rock with my knees up and my hands over my face, and I run the number the way I would run it in the office, and the number does not improve. 1,200 chits. A goat costs 40. A loaf costs 2. This is 30 goats of debt on a parcel where nothing lives. And I have not eaten since a gas station burrito in another universe. What is on parcel 41 is this: 1.5 hectares of chalk. A ring of post holes where a house stood, the posts gone. A stone foundation with the stones taken out of it, so it is a rectangle of empty sockets in the ground, like a mouth. An orchard of 62 stumps, cut flush, no wood left anywhere. 200 meters north, the ground opens into the biggest of the holes, 12 meters across, dropping into black. The system calls it the throat on my map and offers no other information about it. And there's not one single board on this land, not a plank, not a nail. Somebody did not just fail here, somebody was taken apart. I open the deed because I am a man who reads paperwork when he is frightened, and that is where I find the first thing on this world that is genuinely wrong. Parcel 41, the arrears. Holder of record, current, Silas Merritt. Holder of record, prior, Halvard Wren. Status, in service, accruing. Not dead, not released, not vacated, forfeit, deceased, any of the 11 words a system like this has for a man who is gone. In service and still accruing, and under it a field that has been filled in and then closed over, so that the shape of writing is there under the gray. Guarantor, withheld. I sit with that longer than is good for me. Somebody co-signed. That is what that field is. In my old life, I never wrote a bond off the defendant. I wrote it off the cosigner because the defendant is a man having the worst week of his life, and the cosigner is a person with something to lose. Every account has one. 12,000 people just got handed a world and not one of them is asking who signed for it. The panel refreshes. New line, top of the page, and this one has a countdown attached to it that I can feel behind my eyes like a low sound. First reckoning in 6 days. Statement posts at dawn. Minimum due, 90 chits. Failure to remit will result in recovery of secured improvements. We appreciate your business. I laugh out loud on an empty hill. Recovery of secured improvements. On a parcel with no improvements left to recover. Whatever I build in the next 6 days is what they will take. The sun goes down fast in the marches and it takes all the heat with it, because chalk does not hold warmth. It hands it straight back to the sky. By full dark, I am shaking so hard my jaw hurts. I put my back against the tallest slab on the parcel, a shelf of limestone the length of a car, and it is still warm from the afternoon, and that is the moment the second panel opens. The hidden one. The one that was never in the grant announcement, because it was never granted. Anomalous skill detected, underwrite. Grade, unrated. Terms may be offered to any party in contact with the holder. Any party in contact. I put my palm flat on the warm rock, the same way I have put my hand on 100 pledged cars and 100 pledged deeds. Because you never take collateral you have not touched, and I say the only sentence I actually know how to say in this world. I want to borrow. The panel that comes back is the first honest thing this world has shown me. Proposed instrument. Lender, limestone shelf retained heat, parcel 41. Principal, 1 unit heat. Term, 6 hours. Interest, 20%, payable in heat. Collateral, none required at this principal. Rating F, limit, 10 units, term not to exceed 6 hours. 1 unit of heat. I have no idea what a unit is until I accept. And then I know, because it comes up out of the rock into my hand and along my arm and into my chest, and it is the exact amount of warm that a big animal makes. Not magic. Nothing glows. The stone under my palm goes cold and gritty like a cellar wall, and I stop shaking and I sit there in the dark with a borrowed body temperature and a due date. 6 hours. 20%. I owe this rock 1 1/5 units of heat before dawn, and I have no idea in the world how a man pays a rock. I work it out at about hour 4, which I spend gathering every dry stump root I can pull out of the chalk with my hands. You pay a lender in the currency the lender can use. The rock cannot use chits. The rock uses heat. So I build the fire on the shelf itself, right on the cold spot where my hand was, and I feed it roots until the limestone ticks and pops and goes warmer than it ever got at noon. Note performed. Interest received 21%. Notes performed 1. Rating F 1 of 5. That is the whole trick, and I see it in that first hour, sitting cross-legged in front of a fire on a rock at the bottom of the world. The skill is not power. The skill is a line of credit, and credit is a thing I have known since I was 9 years old, standing on a stool behind my father's counter while he explained to a crying woman what a forfeiture is. Credit does not care how strong you are. Credit cares whether you paid last time. So I go looking for things to pay back. Morning. My problem is water, and in the chalk marches water is a joke somebody plays on you. It rains, and the rain is gone in 10 minutes, straight down through the rock. There is not one puddle on my hectare and a half. There is a crow. She is sitting on a stump watching me with white eyes, white all the way through, no pupil, and she does not move when I walk up. Karst crow, the panel says, no grade, no threat. She lets me get one hand on her back, which tells me something about how many people have been kind to birds on this world. Proposed instrument, lender, Karst crow, principal, site 1 hour, interest 40%, payable in food, collateral, none required. 40%. She is a better banker than I am. I take it, and for 1 hour I have 2 sets of eyes and no ability to explain what that is like, except that the world gets wider on both sides and every white thing on the ground turns interesting. I see the way her cousins go, 4 of them, in a line, southeast over the stumps and down. I follow the line half a kilometer to a crack in the pavement of rock, where the wind comes out cool and damp, and 8 meters down in the dark there is water moving. I pay her back in the afternoon with grubs out of a rotten stump, twice what I would have called a fair meal, because 40% is 40%. She eats it all and then she stays. She is still here 11 days later. I call her sixpence, after the smallest coin I could think of that was still worth something, and by the 3rd day she has learned to do an imitation of the system's voice that I cannot describe as anything other than deliberate. She waits until my hands are full. Then she leans down and croaks it. Minimum dewey. I throw a rock at her exactly once. She catches it in the air, which is not a thing crows can do, and buries it, and that is my first hint about the other one. Because there is something living under my stumps. I find the tunnel on the 3rd morning when I put my foot through it, and the thing that comes boiling out is knee-high and chalk white and blind, with claws like a set of trowels welded to a barrel. Mole is the wrong word, there is no right word. The panel says Karst tunneler, juvenile, and gives it no threat rating at all, and it does not attack me. It simply digs, at a rate that makes me sit down and watch it with my mouth open. 2 meters of solid packed chalk in under a minute. I put my hand on it while it is working, because at this point putting my hand on things is my entire profession. Proposed instrument. Principal. Excavation, 6 hours. Interest, 30%. Payable in excavation. Collateral, none required. Rating F. Term not to exceed 6 hours. I pay a mole back in digging. That is what it means. 30% of 6 hours of work by an animal that moves earth like water, owed by a man with a flat rock and a stick, and I spend 3 nights of my life digging holes for a creature that immediately fills them with things it has stolen and then forgets where it put them. My knife, the good coil of cord out of my starter kit. The cap off my pen which I chew, which is a nervous habit my father hated, and which is now the only thing I own from my old life, besides a windbreaker and a dead watch and a carbon receipt book from a bail office in Bakersfield. I call him Tithe. He is worth every hole. What he digs for me between dusk and midnight is the root cellar. Down through the chalk into the old foundation, 3 meters by 4, ceiling of stump timber and packed clay, a step and a door frame and a lid. By then I have also learned the thing that turns this skill from a curiosity into a career, And I learn it the way I learned everything at my father's counter, which is by watching the paperwork instead of the person. The rating does not care how big the note is. It counts performed instruments. 1 unit of heat off a rock, borrowed at dusk and returned with interest before dawn, moves the counter exactly as far as 9 points of anything else. So I take the heat note again on the second night, and again on the third, and I pay it back every time with a fire I would have built anyway. And by the time the cellar has a lid over it, I have performed 5 instruments, and 3 of them are on the same slab of limestone. Anybody who has ever built credit on a secured card knows what I am doing. Nobody on antimony has ever seen a secured card. I sleep underground that night with my back against warm rock, and the panel gives me my first real assessment. Improvement recorded. Dwelling assessed. Tier 1, root cellar. Holding assessment, 35 chits. Notes performed, 5. Credit rating, F to E, limit raised 25 units. Term not to exceed 24 hours. New privilege. Holder may offer instruments to other registered holders. Principal not to exceed 50 chits. I read that last line about 9 times. Offer instruments to other registered holders. Everybody on this world woke up with 500 chits and a bill coming in 6 days. Everybody. Which means somewhere out there in Ward 11 there are 300 parcels full of people who are about to be short, and I am a man who has spent his whole adult life pricing exactly one thing, which is the odds that a frightened person keeps their word. I sit on the step of my hole in the ground, and I laugh until Sixpence gets nervous. Everybody pays, I tell her. The only question is when and in what. She looks at me sideways with those white eyes. Minimum due. The problem with the plan is that 50 chits of lending capacity is not a business. It is a hobby, and I have 4 days. Nobody in this ward is going to take paper from the man at the bottom of the board, and even if they did, the arithmetic does not save me. 90 chits due at dawn on the 7th day, and I own a hole, a bird, a mole, and a fire. Which is why on the 4th day, I go down into the throat, and that is where I meet my first real lender. The throat goes down in 3 steps, like a staircase built by something with no interest in stairs. 12 meters across at the lip, a shelf at 8 meters, another at 19, and then a floor of broken chalk and old bones where the air is wet and 16 degrees warmer than the surface. I go down on a stump root rope with a burning stick in my teeth and Sixpence complaining above me the whole way. I am looking for water. Water is why anybody goes down a hole in this country. What I find on the second shelf is a wall. It is chalk, flat, dressed smooth by hand, and it is covered from my knee to well over my head in scratch marks, tally marks, groups of 5. They start neat and small at the left, the way a man starts anything when he still believes he will be here a short time, and they get wider and messier as they cross the wall. And they do not stop. I count the first 2 columns and stop counting because the arithmetic makes my stomach turn over. Somebody scratched a mark on this wall every day for more than 3,000 days. This world is 4 days old. I stand there with my stick burning down toward my fingers, and I think about a field on a deed that says in service, accruing, and I decide that I am going to find water and go back up and not think about this until I have eaten something. Then the wall snores. It is not the wall. It is the thing lying against the base of the wall, and it is the size of a small car, and it is the same color as everything else down here, which is why I have been standing 2 meters from it for a full minute. Chalk crusted into the bristles until it is armor. Moss growing on the hump of its shoulders like it has been in one place long enough to farm. 1 tusk sheared off at the root. And the eyes, when they open, are white all the way through. The same milk white as the crow, the same as the tunneler, because nothing down here has needed eyes since before anything walked on Earth. Karst, the panel says, grade C, threat rating, do not. Do not, that is the whole rating. the system has never been funnier. He gets up in sections, front then back, and he is between me and the rope, and I do the arithmetic on that too. 6 points of strength, a burning stick. Nowhere to go but a hole in the floor that goes further down. Running is not on the table and fighting was never on the table, so I do the only thing I have ever been good at, which is to walk toward the thing that can hurt me and put my hand on it. I get my palm flat on his shoulder. Under the chalk crust he is hot, like a stove that has been banked all night. Proposed instrument: lender, karst bore, mature, blind, principal 9 points strength, term 6 hours, interest 30%, payable in forage 40 pounds, delivered over 10 days. Collateral: 4 points vitality, held until interest is discharged in full. Accept. I accept in the time it takes him to breathe out. 9 points of strength arrives the way the heat did, straight up my arm, and it is not a feeling of power, it is a feeling of correctness. Like every tool I have ever used was slightly too heavy and now it is not. 6 becomes 15. 4 points of my vitality go the other way, out of me and into an escrow line on a panel, and 7 becomes 3, and I learn what that means over the next 10 days. It means I am cold all the time. It means a scrape on my hand is still open on the 4th morning. It means I sleep like a man with a low fever and wake up tasting metal. That is the price. I want to be clear about the price, because everybody watching this wants the part where the numbers go up, and the numbers do go up. But on this world you rent the good part, and you own the bill. The boar does not eat me. He walks past me, close enough that his shoulder moves me half a step and lies back down against his wall. I go up the rope with 15 strength and pull myself over the lip one-handed, which is a sensation I recommend to anyone. And then I spend the 6 hours I have paid for the way a man with a mortgage spends a Saturday. I quarry out the old foundation sockets, set the stones back into them, lift a lintel that 4 men would argue about, and turn my hole in the ground into a hole in the ground with a stone doorway and a stone wall on the north side against the wind. 16 tons of limestone, moved by a 27-year-old with a bad nose in one afternoon, on borrowed muscle with a due date. At dusk it goes out of me all at once, and I sit down hard in the dirt and cannot lift my own arms. And the boar is standing at the edge of my parcel. He has come up out of the throat, 200 meters, blind, on the exact minute. Not the hour, the minute. He stands at the boundary with his head down and he waits, and Sixpence goes very quiet, and I crawl over to the pile of stump moss and pigweed I cut in the afternoon and I drag 4 pounds of it to him, and he eats it and turns around and goes home. 36 pounds outstanding, 4 pounds a night, 10 nights, delivered at dusk. I test it once. On the 6th day I take out 8 pounds, thinking I will pay 2 nights at once and buy myself a morning free, and he eats 4 pounds and stands there with the rest at his feet and will not touch it. Blind, ancient, moss on his back, and he will not accept an early payment. I never find out whether that is the system or just him. I start calling him Granther because my policy about money and the same expression while enforcing it, and the same expression while exteeing it. By the 5th day my hands are torn up, and my hole has a door, and I am still 90 chits short of the first reckoning with 2 days left, and that is the morning that Ott comes down the fence line. Ott holds parcel 44, 900 meters east, 11 goats and a cheese press and a wife who does the arithmetic in that family. He is the one who typed ARREARS boy on the first day. He does not know that I know that. He stands at my boundary stone with his hat in his hands, and he asks me, in the voice men use when they have practiced a sentence all the way across a field, whether it is true that I can write paper. Here is what it looks like from where he is standing, because I got the rest of it out of him later. Ott has 60 chits. The minimum due is 90. He has 11 goats, and a goat is worth 40. But nobody in Ward 11 is buying goats 2 days before a reckoning, because everybody in Ward 11 is short. The Ward Bank up at Highmark will lend him 30. The Ward Bank charges 50% per term, and Ott can do that sum, And he knows what a man looks like 2 reckonings after he starts paying 50%. So he walks the fence line down to the bottom of the leaderboard, to the boy with the minus sign, because the boy with the minus sign is the only lender on this world who cannot look down on him. I ask him 3 questions. What have you got coming in? When does it come in? And who else has a claim on it? He has cheese coming, 8 rounds. The market opens on the 8th day at the windlass. Cheese sells at 6. Nobody else has a claim. I write him 30 chits at 20% for 1 term. 36 back on the 14th day. Collateral, 2 goats, and I walk over and put my hand on both of them, because you never take collateral you have not touched. Ott watches me do it, and something in his face changes, and I have seen that look across a counter my whole life. It is the look of a man being taken seriously by an institution for the first time. Instrument recorded. Holder to holder. Principal 30. Term 1, interest 20%. Secured. 2 head, goats, parcel 44. He goes home with 30 chits that I do not have. That is the part nobody notices. The system does not require me to hold the money to lend it. It requires me to be good for it. Rating E, limit 50, and I have just spent 30 of the only credit I own on a Gothard who called me a name on the first day. And before anybody asks the obvious question, I ask it too, standing in the road with his dust still in the air. If my rating can stand behind 30 chits of somebody else's rescue, why can it not stand behind my own 90? The statement answers me before I finish thinking it. Ground rent is tendered in coin or in kind. Paper is neither. I can write a promise into another man's hand and the world will enforce it down to the last goat. And I cannot hand that same promise back to the world and call it a payment. Money moves sideways on antimony. It only ever goes up in coin or in meat. I am counting on him. Everybody pays. The only question is when and in what. Verity Calloway comes down the Ward Road on the 6th day with a list. She rides a gray horse and she does not dismount. Dark green coat, silver clasps down the front, a ring of brass keys at her hip. That sounds like a small church every time the horse shifts its weight, and a pale braid pulled so tight it looks like a decision. 2 men walk behind her with a slate. She is 41, and she has the manner of a woman who has run something before, somewhere, and lost nothing in the crossing. She reads names off the slate. She does not need the slate. The accounts are public, so she knows to the chit what every parcel in Ward 11 is short by, and she has come down the road to make each of them the same offer in front of their neighbors. 42 chits, and I assume your arrears, she tells the widow at parcel 38. You keep your stock, you keep your name. You will not be recovered at dusk on the 7th day, and that is worth more to you than the parcel is, because you cannot pay 90 and you know it. The widow signs. 2 parcels down, the same offer, and a man argues, and Calloway waits him out, pleasant as a bank teller. You will pay in kind then, she says. You may. The assessor takes goods at assessed value, and assessed value is half of what the windlass would give you on the 8th day, and the 8th day is 1 day after the 7th. That is not cruelty. That is the calendar. She gets to me last, at the bottom of the road, at the bottom of the list. She looks at my stone doorway. She looks at the field of stumps and the empty foundation sockets and the crow on the fence post, and I watch her price all of it in under 3 seconds. And I know she is good at this because that is how long it takes me. 40 chits, she says, and I assume the arrears on 41. They are 1,200. They are 1,700 by the 3rd reckoning, and you know that too. She leans on the pommel. I have no interest in humiliating you, Mr. Merritt. I have interest in the throat. Nobody has surveyed under this ward, and my quarry is running out of good stone. 40 chits is not an insult. It is what a parcel is worth when the parcel is a whole. No. Why? That is a fair question, and she asks it like one, and I give her the true answer. Because I have never been able to lie to a creditor, only to myself. Because you owe nothing, I say. 200 hectares, free and clear, in perpetuity. Everyone else on this world woke up in the red and did not notice, and you woke up outside the ledger. I want to know why the system made one exception, and I am not going to find that out from the other side of your fence. She is quiet for a second. The keys go quiet with her. Then she smiles, and it is a real smile, which is worse. You are a small man asking a large question, she says. Ask it again when you can pay for the answer. She rides north. 2 of my neighbors are already at her stirrup. And that night, on the ward channel, while 40 people argue about what a parcel is worth and Ott says nothing at all, a stranger posts 11 words and logs off. Secured notes take priority over ground rent. Look it up. The handle is 2 letters and a period. S.R. The system stamps the message licensed scrivener, windlass, which means the words are worth something because a licensed hand on this world is the difference between a promise and an instrument. There is no printing on antimony. Every copy of every contract is written out by hand and witnessed, and the people who do the writing are the only reason anything here is enforceable. I read the 11 words about 20 times. Then I write them in my receipt book, on the carbon, which is the first entry in it since a bail hearing in Kern County. Then it is the 7th day, and the statement posts at dawn. I am sitting on the step of my cellar with my hands wrapped around a cup of hot, nothing when the world goes quiet, and every panel in Ward 11 opens at the same moment. You can hear it. 300 parcels go silent at once, and the birds keep going, and it is the worst sound I know. Statement of account. Silas Merritt, parcel 41. Balance forward, 1,200. Interest first term, 10%. 120 balance, 1,320. Minimum due this reckoning, 90 chits. Payment may be tendered in coin or in kind at assessed value. Recovery of secured improvements commences at dusk. We appreciate your business. A week of work. A stone doorway, a cellar, a mole, a crow. A bird's-eye view of an underground stream. 16 tons of rock moved by hand, and the number went up. That is the sentence I want anyone to take out of the first act of this. I did everything right, and the number went up by 120. And the only reason I am not on my knees about it is that I have spent my whole life watching people learn this in a lobby with a plastic chair, and I always knew that one day it would be my turn. 90 chits. Nothing on this parcel is worth 90 chits. The market opens tomorrow, which is 1 day late, which is the calendar. 13 instruments performed by that morning. 7 of them on a rock, 3 on a bird, 3 on a mole, and the 2 that actually matter are still running. 1 to a Gothard and 1 to a blind boar. Rating E, limit 25 units. Term 24 hours, and 1 lender in the world who is big enough to be worth borrowing from. So I go down the hole. I do it at noon with Granther standing at his wall, and I put my hand on him and take the largest instrument my rating allows. Principal, 12 points strength, 2 points agility. Term, to dusk. Interest, 25%, payable in meat, 60 pounds, delivered this night. Collateral, forage rights, parcel 41, in perpetuity, except 60 pounds of meat, on a world where I have not seen a living thing bigger than a goat except the lender himself. And if I do not have it at his boundary at dusk, he owns the grass on my land forever, which sounds like nothing until you understand that grass is what I would have to sell to pay him, ever again. I take it. 18 strength, 8 agility, 6 hours. The thing that lives on the 3rd shelf of the throat is what has been eating everything else down here. The panel calls it a karst lurker, grade D, and it is 9 feet of white muscle with no eyes, and a jaw hinged like a shovel, and it hunts by pressure by the push of air a body makes moving in a tunnel. I know this because I lie still on the shelf for 40 minutes with a rock in my hand and watch it hunt a bat. Then I stand up and let it hear me. It comes fast. I get the first hit in on the joint of the front leg with a stone the size of a car battery and the leg goes out sideways. It screams. It comes anyway, and I go under the jaw and put my shoulder into its chest, and 18 strength is enough to stop it dead, which surprises us both. Second hit on the same joint. Third hit on the skull, flat, hard, twice. It goes down thrashing and takes the skin off my forearm on the chalk, and I do not let myself think about anything except that this is 60 pounds of interest and 90 chits of principal lying in front of me. Fourth hit, it stops. Kill registered. Karst Lurker, grade D estate. Unencumbered, no instrument attaches. I butcher it on the shelf with a stone flake because my knife is somewhere under Tithe's private collection. And that is when I see the crack. It is behind where the thing was lying, a fissure in the chalk the width of 2 fingers, and there is something wedged in it that is not stone. Paper, rag paper, hand-cut, folded twice, gone hard with damp. I work it out with a splinter and open it on my knee in the light of the burning stick. It is a scrivener's copy. Fair hand, ruled lines, the format I will come to know better than my own signature. Instrument. Holder, Halvard Wren, Parcel 41, Ward 11. Principal, term, interest, all of it written out in a careful clerk's script, and at the bottom 2 lines for signature. The first line has Wren's name on it. The second line says Guarantor, and under it there is a wax seal, pressed and smeared, and the impression is not a letter or a crest or anything I can read. It is a shape I have seen before. It is the shape of the door of my own cellar, the rectangle of the foundation, the same proportions as the thing the system calls a parcel. The seal on the guarantor line is a plot of land. I put it in my jacket pocket. I have 20 minutes of daylight and 2 due dates and 140 pounds of dead lurker to move up a rope. Getting 140 pounds of meat up 19 meters of rope is a problem I solve badly, in 4 trips, with borrowed muscle that is draining out of me the whole time like water out of a cracked jug. The last trip I do at 15 strength, then 13, then 11. The term is not a cliff. It is a slope, and the slope is steep at the end. And by the time I am on the surface with the last load, I am back to 6, and my hands will not close. The sun is a hand's width above the ridge. 20 minutes, maybe. I split the load on the chalk. 60 pounds for Granther, exact, because he counts, and I do not know how he counts, and I have stopped asking. 4 pounds of moss and pigweed on top of it, cut that morning, the 4th of 10 payments. 24 pounds still to run, because the interest on the first instrument does not pause, because I am busy dying on the second one. The rest goes on the flat rock by my door. Hide off in one piece, folded fat side out. The fat rendered down in the fire I have kept alive since the first night on that same warm shelf. Granther comes up out of the throat with the last of the light. He eats the 60 pounds. It take a long time, and I stand there swaying while he does it. And Sixpence sits on my shoulder for the first time in her life, and Tithe watches from a hole with only the top of his head showing. And I understand, in a way I did not understand behind a counter in Bakersfield, why my father would not eat until a collection was closed. Interest received in full. Instrument performed. Notes performed. 14. Collateral released. Forage rights. Parcel 41. He takes the 4 pounds of moss as a separate matter, because it is a separate matter, and goes home. And behind me, all across Ward 11, the world starts taking things apart. There is no sound to it that I can describe. It is the opposite of a storm. A fence comes up out of the ground post by post, in reverse order, last post first, and hangs in the air, and unhooks itself into a stack of rails that then is not there. A roof lifts off a shed and the boards separate and go, one board at a time, and the boards are gone, and then the beams and then the pins out of the beams. Recovery of secured improvements in the exact reverse of the order it was built until the balance clears. 19 parcels in my ward, that first reckoning. I count them from my doorstep by the gaps that open on the horizon. Parcel 38 is not one of them, because the widow sold to Calloway 3 days ago and kept her stock and her name. The man who argued on the road is one of them, and I hear him shouting at nothing from 900 meters away, and there is nobody to shout at, because there is nobody doing it. It is a statement. It is arithmetic with hands. The panel is very patient with me while I tender payment. Payment tendered in kind. Hide, karst lurker, prime, assess 62. Rendered fat, 11 pounds, assess 34. Total 96 chits against minimum due 90. There is a pause, and I swear the pause is deliberate. Payment received. Balance, 1,224 chits. Account current. Thank you for your payment. We appreciate your business. Account current. I sit down on my step with my back against my own stone doorway and my hands shaking too hard to hold anything, and I laugh, and then it turns into something else for a while, and sixpence croaks minimum due directly into my ear, and I do not throw anything at her. A week ago I owed 1,200. I have moved 16 tons of rock, dug a house out of the earth, killed a thing that eats bats in the dark, and paid 96 chits into the account. I owe 1,224. That is the truth about interest, and I want it stated plainly once before we go on, because everything I do from here is built on the day I finally understood it in my body instead of on a page. You cannot survive a debt. Nobody has ever survived one. Surviving is what the minimum payment is for, and the minimum payment is designed by the lender, and the lender is not in a hurry. The only two things that have ever gotten a man out of the red are somebody else's money and time. I have no money. I have time, 6 days of it, and one credit rating that went up while my balance did. The leaderboard refreshes at full dark. 12,000 names. Verity Calloway, 92,400, unchanged, because nothing on this world touches her. And down at the bottom, the line with the minus in front of it moves for the first time. 11,240 of 12,000. Silas Merritt, minus 994. Still the only negative in the chalk marches, 760 places off the floor. The last thing that happens on the 7th day is that the system posts a notice to every holder in the region, and this one is not addressed to me personally, and it does not include the sentence about appreciating my business. Regional market convenes at the Windlass Crossroads at first light on the 8th day. Ground water surfaces at that location. All licensed trades in attendance, assayers, drovers, scriveners. Holders are reminded that instruments require a licensed hand to be enforceable. Second reckoning in 7 days. Minimum due, 180 chits. 180, it doubled. I take out my receipt book and turn to the second page and copy out 11 words that a stranger with 2 initials put on the ward channel the night before, because I have started to think that they might be the most valuable thing anyone has said out loud on this world. Secured notes take priority over ground rent. Then I write under it, in my own hand, a sentence that is going to cost 41 people their fear, and cost one woman with 200 hectares considerably more than that. Everybody in this ward is short. I am the only man here who is already at the bottom, and the bottom is the only place on antimony where you can stand up. The Windlass is 7 kilometers southwest of my parcel, and I walk it on the 8th morning with 80 pounds of lurker meat on my back and a bird riding my shoulder like she has an appointment. The crossroads is the one place in the chalk marches where the water comes back up. That is the whole reason it exists. Everything that falls on this country goes straight down through the rock and runs in the dark for kilometers, and then at the Windlass, it hits a bed of clay and has nowhere to go but out, into a pool the color of a bottle, with a stone rim somebody built in a world that is 8 days old. Around the pool, 200 people, 40 carts, a rope maker, an assayer's table under an awning, a drover with a string of animals, and a low building of dressed stone with a green door and a copyist's board hung out over it. I have never in my life seen so many people who all know exactly what I am worth. That is the thing about public accounts. On Earth, you can walk into a room broke, and nobody knows until you try to pay. Here, I come up the road and I watch the number arrive in their faces one at a time. The rope maker looks at my meat, then at the space over my head where my line on the board sits, and he says, politely, that he does not deal in credit today. I am not asking for credit. I have never once asked for credit. But a man carrying a minus sign is a man asking for credit whether he opens his mouth or not. And by noon I have sold 80 pounds of prime lurker to a stall that then resells it at 3 times what he gave me. And I have 14 chits in my pocket, and my minimum due at the second reckoning is 180. So I stop trying to sell what I have and go and look at what nobody wants. What nobody wants is standing at the end of the drover's string with his head down. Karst ox, shaggy, one horn snapped off short, built like a wall with legs and about as motivated. The drover is asking 13 chits for him, which is a third of a goat, and he is asking 13 because the animal has a defect. He will not pull, the drover says. Nothing wrong with him. He is not lame, he is not sick, he is not old. He will not pull. I put my hand on the ox, habit, and the panel does not offer me an instrument because there is nothing this animal has that I need, but it does show me his line, and his line says, in the same flat clerk's hand the system uses for everything, unpaid. I take a fistful of the drover's own hay off the cart, hold it under the ox's nose, let him take it, and then walk. He walks. 20 meters, easy as breathing, then stops dead. I give him another fistful. He walks again. He is not lame, and he is not stubborn. He wants to be paid. Every time. Every leg of every trip forever, and no amount of hay in advance means anything to him, which I know something about, because I have a blind boar at home with the same philosophy. I buy him for 13 chits, and I name him done, and over the next 12 days I calculate that I hand that animal roughly 400 separate payments, and he never once takes it on account. 1 chit left, and the building with the green door. Instruments require a licensed hand. That is the sentence from the market notice, and it turns out to mean exactly what it says. My paper with ought is enforceable because a scrivener at the windlass copied it out of the system record and witnessed it on the 6th day for 3 chits, out of ought's pocket, which I did not know at the time. Without that, we have a conversation. With it, we have an instrument, and the system will take 2 goats off a man's parcel to satisfy it. There is no printing press on antimony. There is no press, no type, no plate, nothing. Every enforceable word on this world is written out by hand, 1 copy at a time, by people who are licensed to be believed, and the whole economy of the chalk marches moves at the speed of those hands. I stand in front of the green door for a while. Then I knock and get no answer, and I notice the slot. It is a brass mouth set into the door at chest height, wide enough for folded paper, with a worn lip. Copy in, copy out. Half the crossroads does business with this house without ever seeing whose hand does the work, because that is how the trade protects itself. A scrivener who meets you can be leaned on. A scrivener who is a slot cannot. I write my request on the back of a page, out of my receipt book, in pen, in the only handwriting on this world that comes from a bail office in Kern County, and I push it through. I want 40 instruments copied and witnessed over the next 6 days, holder to holder, small principals, 1 term. I can pay 3 chits a copy out of the first proceeds, and I have 1 chit today. My rating is E, and my account is the one with the minus in front of it, and you already know that. I wait. The pool makes its noise. 6pence goes and steals something. The paper that comes back is a different animal from mine. Ruled lines, even margins. Letters that all agree with each other, the kind of hand that took somebody years. 4 sentences. 40 is more copies than this house does in a month. The house will not take work from an account in arrears while the ward bank is watching it. I am licensed personally, and the license is mine, not the house's. Push the first one through, and we will find out together. Signed 2 letters and a period, SR. I put my forehead against the green door for a second, which is not the behavior of a serious man of business. And then I go and find the first person in Ward 11 who is short. There are, at that point, 281 of them. Here is the arithmetic that runs the rest of this story, and it is the only piece of finance in it that matters, so I am going to lay it out flat. Everyone on this world borrows in chits, and chits are scarce because the advance was 500, and the reckoning takes them back, and nothing new comes in except what people dig out of the ground. When chits are scarce, the price of chits goes up. Verity Calloway charges 50% per term at the Ward Bank because she can, and because there is nowhere else to go, and because she is the only holder in the marches whose own cost of money is zero, free and clear, in perpetuity. My cost of money is not zero. My cost of money is 40 pounds of moss over 10 days, and 6 hours of digging owed to a mole, and a fire built on a rock at night. I do not borrow chits at all. I borrow strength from a blind boar and sight from a crow, and I turn them into things that people at a crossroads will pay for, and then I lend the chits at 20% to people. Calloway is charging 50. The Ward Bank sells money. I sell the thing money buys, and I get it out of a hole in the ground for moss. That is the entire cheat. Everything from here is scale. The first instrument goes through the slot on the 9th morning and comes back witnessed in under an hour, and that is the moment the chalk marches change hands, although it takes 11 more days for anyone to notice. The instrument is for a woman at parcel 60 who needs 22 chits, and the 22 chits do not come out of my pocket because I do not have 22 chits. They come out of the same place everything I own comes out of, which is the ground. Here is how I get water in a country that has none. Limestone is a sponge with a memory. Rain goes down and finds a crack and follows it, and over a very long time the crack becomes a pipe, and the pipe becomes a river, and the river runs under your feet in the dark 40 meters down, and you will die of thirst standing on top of it. Everyone in Ward 11 hauls water. From the windlass, from the seeps in barrels on carts, 6 hours a day out of a working life. And the holdings that fail out here fail because a man spends his whole term carrying water instead of making anything. Tithe knows where every one of those pipes runs. He does not know it the way I know a street. He knows it the way you know where a fly is in a dark room, by the sound it makes moving. Proposed instrument, lender, karst tunneler, principal, sense of running water, 6 hours, interest, 30% payable in excavation, collateral, none required. I take it, and the whole world starts talking underneath me. It is not sound, and I am not going to pretend it is. It is closer to knowing which way is down. I walk a parcel with my boots off, and the water under it draws itself in my head like a wet line on paper. Here it runs at 40 meters, and you will never reach it. Here it comes up under a clay shelf at 9. Here, right here, under this thorn bush, at 4.5 meters, there is a pipe as thick as my leg running north. I mark it with a stake. I write out what depth, what direction, what the rock does on the way down, and I sell that piece of paper to the holder of the parcel for 60 chits. 60 chits for an afternoon. The holder digs a well at the stake and hits water at 4 meters and 40 centimeters. And by the 11th day, everybody in the ward knows what the stakes mean, and the price of a proven site goes from 60 to 75 to 90. And on the 12th day, a syndicate of 4 parcels pays me 120 for one because they are going to share the shaft. 6 sites in 5 days, 510 chits. And every one of those sites, I write into an instrument, because I am not selling water. I am selling a promise about water, and a promise on this world is only worth what a licensed hand says it is worth. 3 chits a copy to the green door. Everyone comes back inside 2 hours with those even margins and the 2 initials, and by the 4th one there is something written in the bottom corner, small, outside the ruled lines. Your hand is terrible. Your terms are not. Send the next one before noon. The light in here is better before noon. I read that about as many times as I read my first privilege line. The counter turns over on the 9th evening while I am cutting moss. Notes performed, 20. Credit rating, E to D. Limit raised, 60 units. Term not to exceed 3 days. Instruments to other holders. Principal not to exceed 200 chits. New privilege. Revolving facility. A lender in a performing relationship may extend a standing line. A standing line. I read the terms twice, and then I go down the throat and put my hand on a sleeping boar and negotiate the first credit facility in the history of antimony. Facility recorded. Lender, Karst-Bohr mature blind, draw, 12 points strength, 6 hours once daily. Interest, 4 pounds forage, payable at dusk per draw plus 60 pounds meat per term. Collateral, all improvements, parcel 41. Everything I have built, pledged against a standing line from a pig. My father would have had opinions. My father also never had to explain to a bank why he was pledging a stone doorway. The facility runs alongside the original note, which is still paying itself off at 4 pounds a night through the 13th day. So from the 9th to the 13th, I owe 8 pounds of forage every dusk, and cutting 16 pounds of moss a day off a hectare and a half of bare chalk is not a metaphor for anything. It is a job, and I do it with a stone flake and torn hands, while Tithe follows me around burying the flake. But with 12 points of strength 6 hours a day, I clear an acre of stump and thorn for a neighbor before lunch and charge 45 for it. I break out a collapsed cistern. I quarry a doorstep. Dunn carries it all, one fistful of hay at a time, at a pace that makes grown men laugh out loud at the crossroads. By the 13th day, the numbers look like this: 510 from water, 220 from labor. 41 instruments out at 20%, principal 1107, every one of them witnessed by the same hand behind the same green door. Of that 1107, about 300 is coin, because about 300 is all the coin I ever have at one time. The rest I lend the way I earn it, which is in kind. A proven water site to the man at parcel 29, 3 days of cleared ground to the syndicate, 90 pounds of stone, cut, 40 pounds of meat. It works because of one line in the first statement I ever got on this world, the one everybody read past on the 7th day. Ground rent is tendered in coin or in kind at assessed value. A man who owes 90 chits does not need 90 chits. He needs 90 chits worth of something the assessor will take, and the assessor will take almost anything, at half of what it is worth, which is exactly the kind of terrible price a man will accept at dusk on a reckoning. So I do not lend money into a ward with no money in it. I lend the things money buys at 20%, and I take back labor and cheese and stone. And the ward has stopped being afraid. That is the part I did not expect and could not have priced. On the first reckoning, 19 parcels in Ward 11 were taken apart at dusk. On the 11th day, I walk past a man rebuilding a fence he lost, and he stops working to shake my hand, and I do not know his name. Verity Calloway is not slow. She has never once been slow. On the 11th day, the Ward Bank drops its rate from 50% to 15%. It is a beautiful move, and I sit down on a rock when I hear it, the way you do when somebody plays something you did not see. She can lend at 15 forever. Her money costs her nothing. She has no ground rent. She has 200 hectares of standing timber in a quarry, and she can run the Ward Bank at a loss until the year turns and never feel it. I cannot. 20% is not greed. 20% is my margin over moss and torn hands, and a pig who does not accept early payment, and at 15, I am working for the pleasure of it. Ott comes to me about it, which tells you how much the road has changed in 6 days. He does the sum out loud. 15 from Highmark or 20 from you. Take the 15, I tell him. He looks at me like I have hit him. Here is what I do not say to Ott, because you never explain your book to your borrower. At 15%, The ward bank is buying the ward's paper at a loss to starve me, and a rate you cannot pay for is not a rate, it is a siege. Sieges end. When it ends, her rate goes back to 50, and the people who ran to her will be in her book, not mine, and she will have their parcels the way she got the widows on the 6th day, for 42 chits and a kind word. What I do instead is go and count the things she cannot buy at any rate. She cannot buy a bird that finds water. She cannot buy a mole. She cannot buy the throat, because the throat is on my land, and the deed says so in a hand nobody argues with. And on the 12th day, the system posts the ward statement, and I find the third thing on this world that is genuinely wrong. It goes to every holder. It is a summary, the way a bank sends a page nobody reads, and the header is not addressed to a person. Consolidated statement. Ward 11, the chalk marches. Account the estate of antimony. Status in arrears. The estate of antimony. Not the holders of antimony. Not the settlement, the colony, the world. The estate, which is the word you use for what a dead man leaves behind, and it is in arrears, which is my word, the word off my own deed, and it is attached to the entire planet. I go down the list of ward accounts, out of pure habit, the way I used to read the docket in the morning. 300 parcels, 299 names I can match to a living person at the crossroads. And one line at the bottom under recoveries. Halvard Wren, Parcel 41, in service, interest accrued to date, 3 years, 2 terms. 3 years. I stand in a field of stumps on a world that is 12 days old with a statement in front of my eyes charging a man 3 years of interest, and the wind comes up warm out of the throat behind me, and Sixpence, who has been quiet all afternoon, says it in the system's own voice, quietly, right next to my ear. Minimum due. The ward bank moves against my paper on the 12th day, in the afternoon, and it does it politely, which is how everything on antimony ends up being done. There is no accusation. Nobody says I am a fraud. What appears on the ward channel is a notice from the ward bank, over Calloway's own name, advising holders that instruments drawn by an account in arrears may be found unscrivened at the assize, and that the bank will not accept such paper as security against its own lending. 23 words of it. It costs her nothing, and it is not even a lie, because may be found is doing all the work in that sentence, and a scrivener house that wants to keep its business with the largest lender in the marches will read it exactly the way she wrote it. By evening, the green door has a board hung over the slot. I stand in front of it with 17 instruments in my hand, 17 households in Ward 11 who are 2 days from the second reckoning, and I do the only thing available to a man in front of a locked door, which is to knock and keep knocking. The board comes off the slot at full dark. A hand comes out, ink to the second knuckle, a scar across the back of it, a copyist's cuff buttoned tight at the wrist, and it is the first piece of her I have ever seen. She takes the 17. The hand goes back in. The paper that comes out with it says 4 lines. The house is not licensed. I am. The license hangs on my own name, and my own name is not in arrears. If you want it done tonight, keep the candle money coming and do not knock again, the neighbors talk. They come back witnessed at some hour I do not want to think about. All 17. The letters as even as the first one, and at the bottom of the last one there is a line outside the margin. She charges 15 because she can afford to. You charge 20 because you cannot. Do not let anybody at that crossroads tell you which one of those is generosity. I send Sixpence back with 3 chits and a strip of lurker fat, and after that the bird works the route on her own, twice a day, green door to parcel 41, and it takes her about 9 minutes to learn that if she says the system's line at the slot, the paper comes out faster. That is how it goes for the rest of the term. 281 short holdings, 41 instruments, 1 licensed hand, 1 crow, and a rate 2 points above a woman who does not need the money. The counter turns over at dusk on the 13th day, while I am carrying the last 8 pounds of moss out to the boundary stone. Notes performed 60. Credit rating D2C new privilege. Instruments may be secured against a registered holding. A secured instrument attaches to the parcel and runs with it. Runs with it. 4 words. I stand there in the dark with an armful of weeds and read them the way you read a door you have been trying to open for a week. And behind me, Granther comes up out of the throat on his exact minute and eats 4 pounds of moss for the 10th and last time. Interest discharged in full. Instrument performed. Collateral released. 4 points vitality. It comes back into me all at once. I want to tell you it is like water in the desert. It is not. It is like the moment a fever breaks at 4 in the morning and you realize that the person you have been for 10 days was not you. It was a man with 3 vitality, and everything that man did, he did while cold and slow and unable to heal. I sit down in the chalk and breathe for a while. Then I go and cut 16 more pounds of moss, because the facility is still running, and dusk comes every day whether you have had a moment or not. The second reckoning posts at dawn on the 14th day. Statement of account. Silas Merritt, Parcel 41. Balance forward, 1,224. Interest, second term, 10% 122. Balance, 1,346. Minimum due this reckoning, 180 chits. Recovery of secured improvements commences at dusk. We appreciate your business. I pay it in coin at 9 in the morning, out of 510 chits of water money, and I stand there and watch a number go down for the first time since I arrived on this world. Balance, 1,166. 58 chits. That is the whole of it. 14 days, 1 dead lurker, 6 wells, 41 instruments, 160 pounds of moss, and I have moved the wall 58 chits closer. At that rate, the arrears on Parcel 41 come clear in something like 4 years, assuming nothing ever goes wrong, and on this world something goes wrong every 7 days. But it moved, down, in the right direction. I write the number in the receipt book, and I look at it for a long time. Ott pays me at noon, 36 chits, counted out of a cheese purse on my boundary stone, and he insists on doing it in front of 2 of his neighbors, and I understand why, and I let him. Then I walk over and take my hand off his goats, formally, the way my father used to hand back a title, and the system closes the instrument, and Ott's wife makes a sound that I choose not to interpret. And at dusk on the 14th day, Ward 11 loses 2 parcels. 2. Out of 300. 1 is a man who told me to my face on the 9th day that he would not sign anything a boy with a minus sign put in front of him, and I did not argue, because you cannot underwrite a man against his own pride. The other is an absentee whose parcel nobody has walked in a week. 19 the first time, 2 the second. I stand on my step and watch 2 roofs come apart on the horizon instead of 19, and I feel nothing I would call triumph. What I feel is the thing I used to feel on a Friday when the last cosigner of the week went home with her deed back in her purse, which is a kind of tiredness that has a floor under it. Verity Calloway sits on her gray horse up on the Ward Road for most of that dusk, watching the same horizon I am watching, counting the same 2 roofs. She does not come down. She does not need to. From up there she can see every parcel in Ward 11 that she was going to own by the end of the term, still standing, still holding stock, still paying 20% to a man who lives in a hole. The leaderboard refreshes at full dark. 3,900 of 12,000. Silas Merritt. And for the first time since day 1 of the first term of the 9th advance, there is no minus in front of my number. The assize notice posts on the 15th day, and it is the first time the system has ever told me something I could use. Assize of the chalk marches convenes at the windlass. 20th day, first light. 22 holdings in Ward 11 stand delinquent beyond recovery, and shall be offered for sale, clear of all obligation. Where a holding cannot be conveyed clear, the assize may assign it to the secured party at the value of the security. A secured instrument may be redeemed by the holder of the parcel it attaches to, and by no other party. Holders in arrears may cure at any time before the hammer. 22. I know alt 22. They are the parcels that were taken apart at dusk on the 7th day, the ones that lost a barn and a fence and a roof and never got back up, because a holding that has been recovered once cannot make the next payment either, which is the entire design of the thing. They still live there. They are still eating. They just do not own the ground under their beds anymore. They are renting it from an arithmetic that has already decided about them. Callaway will buy all 22 on the 20th day for the price of a good horse. I read the notice 4 times, and then I read the second sentence for the 5th time, and I take out the receipt book and copy 11 words that a stranger put on the ward channel on the 6th night, back when I did not know whose hand it was. Secured notes take priority over ground rent. On the 16th day, the ward bank calls its loans. It is in her paper. Of course, it is in her paper. Every instrument the bank wrote at 15% carries a line saying the bank may call the principal at any time on 1 day's notice, and nobody read it because nobody reads it, because the people signing were 3 days from having a roof lifted off them, and a woman on a gray horse was offering 15 when everyone else was at 50. She calls 210 of them across the ward at once, 1 day. It drains Ward 11 of coin like pulling a plug. Every chit anybody had goes north to Highmark in a day and a half. And it does not go there because she needs it. It goes there so that on the 20th day, at the assize, not one of those 22 households will have a single coin to cure with, and so that my 41 borrowers will have nothing to pay me with either, and my book will fold about 9 hours before the hammer. It is the best move anybody makes in this entire story, and I want to be fair to it. If I were a bank, I would be finished. I am not a bank. I have never once been a bank. A bank lends money. I lend the odds that a frightened person keeps their word, and I have been taking payment in whatever a frightened person actually has since I was 19 years old. So on the 17th day, I go up and down the ward road, and I restructure 41 instruments in a day and a half, and not one of them settles in coin. The man at parcel 63 pays me in labor 9 days of it, at the rate the crossroads pays. The syndicate at the north end pays me in stone, cut and stacked. Ott pays me in cheese, 30 rounds, which I do not want and cannot eat, and which the ropemaker at the windlass wants very much. A woman at parcel 12 has nothing at all except a hand loom and 4 days a week, and I write her a new instrument at the same 20% and take the 4 days. None of that goes on the leaderboard. The leaderboard counts coin and stock and holdings and the paper you hold, and while Verity Callaway is draining the ward of chits, my number sits still and hers goes up, and up on the ridge she has every reason to believe she is winning. Then on the 18th and 19th days, I do the thing the notice told me I could do, and I do it 22 times. I walk into 22 stripped holdings with Dunn behind me carrying a crate, and I make the same offer at every door. I will pay what you are short, not lend it against your goats, not against your stock, against the parcel. A secured instrument, principal what you owe, term 1, interest 20%, and the security attaches to the ground and runs with it. Some of them cry. 3 of them will not sign. 19 do, and then the 3 come after me down the road on the 2nd morning and sign in the dust on Dunn's crate, because their neighbors told them what it means. It cleans me out. That is the honest arithmetic. 22 holdings, an average of 43 chits each, 946 in total, and I do not have 946. I have 366 in coin, and everything else I own gets converted at the crossroads in one long ugly afternoon. The meat, the hides, the stone, the cheese, 2 of the water sites I was saving, all of it, at whatever the assayer's table will give a man in a hurry. 592 chits for the lot, which is about half what any of it is worth, on a day when I am not desperate, and the assayer knows I am desperate, because he can see my line on the board the same as everyone else. 958 in, 946 out. On the evening of the 19th day, my cash on hand is 12 chits, and I have not eaten since morning. And the last 22 copies come back through the slot at 4 in the morning, in that even hand everyone witnessed, with a note tucked under the last of them. My wrist is finished, and my candle is finished, and I have copied your handwriting in my sleep for 3 nights. If this does not work, I am going to be extremely annoyed with you. If it does work, I am at the 3rd table from the pool at the assize behind the register screen, and you still will not see me, because the house has its rule about clients and my license is all I own. SR. The assize convenes at first light on the 20th day, and the whole ward comes, because everybody at that crossroads knows that 22 families are about to be sold out from under themselves, and because there is nothing else to do at a crossroads. The clerk of the assize sets his table by the pool. Calloway arrives on the gray horse with 2 factors and her ring of keys, and she does not look at me once, which is how I know she has looked at me quite a lot. They start with parcel 19, assessed at 400, arrears of 610. The clerk reads the description, opens the bidding at the arrears, and Calloway's factor raises 1 finger, and that is going to be the whole auction, 22 times, 10 minutes, done before the sun clears the ridge. Then the clerk turns the page in the encumbrance register, which he is required to do, and which nobody in the history of this world has ever cared about. Register discloses 1 instrument secured against this holding. Principal 45 chits. Term running. Witnessed licensed hand SR. The holding cannot be conveyed clear of obligation. The pool makes its noise, nobody else does. The clerk reads the rule off his own notice, because he is a clerk, and the rule is on the page in front of him. Secured notes take priority over ground rent. Parcel with a live secured instrument on it cannot be sold clear. It may be assigned to the secured party at the value of the security, or it may be withdrawn. Calloway's factor lowers his finger and looks back at the horse. Parcel 22. Register discloses 1 instrument, witnessed licensed hand SR. Parcel 30. Register discloses 1 instrument, licensed hand SR. 22 times. 22 parcels, 22 liens, and the same 2 initials read out loud across a crossroads by a man with no interest in drama, and by the 9th one people have started to laugh, and by the 15th the laughing has stopped and turned into something with an edge on it, because they are all doing the same sum, which is that 22 households are going home. Not one of the 22 goes to the assize. 19 are withdrawn, and the holders keep them under my instruments. 3 are assigned to me at the value of the security, and I hand each of those 3 back to its family the same hour, under a new instrument at the same 20%, in front of everybody, because a man who takes 3 houses on the day he saves 19 is a man with a very short career. Assize concluded. Holdings conveyed, none. Instruments performed this term 152 credit rating, C to B. 2 more things happen before the clerk has his table folded up. The ward bank withdraws its notice about unscrivened paper. 12 words on the ward channel, no apology in them, and the board comes off the slot in the green door for good. And by evening the house is taking work from me at the front counter like I am anybody. Not from her. She keeps her own rule about clients and her own reasons for it, and I still have not seen her face. And the system reassesses my parcel. It has to. 22 secured instruments have just put the words water rights into the register 22 times in one morning, and every one of those sites came off a map that exists in exactly one place in the chalk marches, which is under parcel 41. The throat is not a hole. The throat is the mouth of the only charted water in the ward. and I am the only holder alive who can walk a hectare barefoot and tell you what runs under it. Holding reassessed. Parcel 41, the arrears. Water rights, 12 proven pipes charted, assessed 3,200 chits. 40 chits. That is what she offered me for it on the 6th day, and she offered it because she already knew, and I did not. The leaderboard refreshes at noon instead of at dark, which I did not know it could do. 410 of 12,000. Silas Merritt. Calloway comes to me at the third table, past the register screen, close enough that I can hear the keys. 20%, she says. On 600 people next term. You will need a hand to enforce it. The system enforces it. The system is a clerk, Mr. Merritt. Clerks do not enforce, they record. She pulls her gloves on, one and then the other. You have never in your life collected from somebody who decided not to pay. You have collected from people who were afraid of the thing behind you. Ask yourself what is behind you here, and whether you have ever seen it work. She takes her horse north. That afternoon, one of her factors quietly buys a proven water site off me for 90 chits, for a seep on the far side of the quarry, and pays in coin, and asks me not to write it into the ward register. That is the first chit Verity Calloway ever owes me. It is not the last. I settle 66 chits of copy fees through the slot on my way out of the crossroads, which leaves me 36, and I get back to parcel 41 at dusk with 36 chits, 206 in fresh receivables, a bird, a mole, an ox, and a debt of 1,166 that I have moved by a grand total of 58 in 20 days. Granther comes up out of the throat on his minute and takes his 4 pounds of moss. The sun goes down over the chalk marches. For about 90 seconds, standing in the door of my own hole in the ground, I am the happiest I have ever been in either world. Then every panel in Ward 11 opens at once at night, off schedule, and the sound the ward makes is not one I have heard before. Extraordinary notice. The grace term of the 9th advance is concluded. Consolidation of Ward 11, the chalk marches, is effected this hour. All obligations within the ward, owed and owing, are consolidated and assigned to a single holder of record. I know before it says it. I have known since the clerk turned the page in the register. Holder of record, Silas Merritt, parcel 41. Receivables assigned, 2,831. Arrears assigned, 39,600. Minimum due, third reckoning, first light tomorrow. 10% of consolidated arrears, 3,960 chits. 3,960 by morning, and I have 36. Guarantor, disclosure pending. 30 days, we appreciate your business. Sixpence says it into the dark in that voice, and for once nobody laughs. And on my deed in the field that has said the same 3 words, since the first hour I stood on this rock, the entry for the holder of record before me changes while I am looking at it. Halvard Wren, status released. Down in the throat, 200 meters north of my door, something starts coming up. The warm air off the shaft goes over me, smelling of chalk and old water. Tithe does not dig. He sits on the lip of the hole with his blind face pointed straight down into it, and he does not move. And Granther, who has never once in 20 days been anywhere except exactly where he is supposed to be, is already gone. The third reckoning posts at first light on the 21st day, and for the first time since I arrived on this world, the statement is not addressed to a man. Statement of account. Consolidated holder of record, Silas Merritt, parcel 41, Ward 11, the chalk marches. Consolidated arrears, 39,600. Interest, third term, 10%, 3,960. Balance, 43,560. Minimum due this reckoning, 3,960 chits. Consolidated accounts are enforced in person. We appreciate your business. Enforced in person. I sit on the step of my cellar with 36 chits in a leather fob that used to hold the keys to a bail office, and I read that line about 9 times. And out across the ward, 300 panels open at the same moment, and 300 people read something slightly different from what I am reading. Theirs says their arrears have been assigned. Theirs says they no longer owe the world. They owe me. That is what consolidation is, and it takes the ward about 4 minutes to work it out. I watch it happen from my doorstep the way you watch weather come across open country. A man at parcel 60 stands up in his yard. 2 women at the north end stop where they are on the road. Ott comes out of his gate and looks 900 meters west at my hill, and he does not wave. Yesterday I was the man who saved 22 households from the hammer. This morning I am the reason they owe anything at all, and every chit of it is payable to a boy who lives in a hole. The bailiff comes over the ridge at noon. I want to be careful describing him, because a lot of what happens later depends on my getting a good look at him now, and because I did not understand for another 2 weeks that I was looking at my own file. He is tall. He walks like a man covering distance he has covered many times. Long gray coat, the wool gone hard, and over the shoulder a chain, and on the chain, seals. 40 or 50 of them, wax and lead, each one stamped with the shape I found on a scrivener's copy in a crack in the throat, which is to say each one is stamped with a parcel. They knock together as he comes, and it is the only sound he makes. His hands are chalk white. His face is chalk white. And his eyes, when he stops in front of my boundary stone, are white all the way through, no pupil, the same as the crow and the tunneler and the old boar, the same as everything on antimony that has been under the ground longer than it should have been. Consolidated account, Ward 11, he says. Minimum due 3,960, tender. I hand him 36 chits. He takes them. He does not react. He puts them somewhere inside the coat, and he says the next line the way a clerk reads a docket, and it is the single worst sentence anybody has said to me in either of my lives. Tender insufficient. Levy proceeds. Receivables of the consolidated holder are set off against consolidated arrears. And my book goes out like a lamp. I keep the receipt book. That is the joke. I keep the carbon copies of every instrument I have ever written, 63 of them, 41 and 22, every one of them in my own bad handwriting, and copied out fair by the only licensed hand that would touch my paper, and they are all still there in my pocket. What goes is what stands behind them. The system nets my receivables against the ward's arrears in a single line, and every debt anybody in Ward 11 owes me is credited to the world instead. 2,831 chits of paper, gone in the time it takes to say it. Of 63 instruments, 0 remain. Levy continues. Chartered assets, parcel 41. Water rights, 12 proven pipes. No. He does not hear me, because he is not a man who hears things. He is a procedure. He lifts one seal off the chain, presses it against the air over my boundary stone, and my parcel gets lighter. I can feel it. 12 lines of running water that I found with my boots off, and a borrowed sense, 12 pipes charted in my own hand at 4.5 and 9 and 31 meters, the only mapped water in Ward 11, and the register takes them off my page and puts them up for immediate sale at the windlass on the same breath. They sell in under an hour. 2,400 chits. The buyer is not present at the sale and does not need to be, because the buyer left a standing bid with the clerk of the assize 11 days ago. On the afternoon of the day her factor paid me 90 chits for a seep on the far side of her quarry. Verity Calloway has been waiting for this since the 6th day. Levy continues. Stock parcel 41. 1 karst ox assessed 13. He takes done. That is the one that does it to me, and I am aware of how that sounds. 2,800 chits of paper, and the only charted water in the ward go first, and I stand there and take it, and then a chalk white man leads a shaggy animal with one broken horn off my land, and Dunn stops after 20 meters, because Dunn always stops after 20 meters, and stands there waiting to be paid. The bailiff does not know what he is looking at. He pulls. Nothing happens. He pulls again. I walk over and put a fistful of moss in that ox's mouth, and he walks off my parcel eating it, and I go back to my step and sit down. Levy continues improvements parcel 41. They are secured. It comes out of me flat and fast, before I have consciously assembled it, the way an objection comes out of a man who has spent his life in rooms, where the objection has to be on the record before the next sentence lands. Improvements on parcel 41 are pledged as collateral under a standing facility. Lender, karst bor mature blind. Recorded on the 9th day. Secured notes take priority over ground rent. The bailiff stops. For 4 full seconds there is nothing on that white face at all, and then the seals on his chain shift, and the system says the thing I have been betting my life on since a stranger with 2 initials posted 11 words on the ward channel. Secured instrument confirmed. Improvements are not available to the levy. Levy concludes. I have never been so grateful to a pig in my life. Payment applied, 5,267. Balance, 38,293. Then he turns his head and looks at me directly for the first time, and the seals go quiet. First default recorded. 2 remain. Service commences upon 3rd default. What is service? He does not answer. He has answered every other line today because every other line is on the page, and this one is not on the page, and a procedure does not improvise. He turns and walks back over the ridge with my ox on a rope, and the chain of parcels on his shoulder knocks together the whole way, and I sit on my step and look at the number. 38,293. 50 days ago, a man on earth could have made me sweat over a $4,000 bond. I am now, personally, on a public leaderboard, in front of 12,000 people, in the hole for the price of a small county. The board refreshes at dusk, and I do not need to look at it, and I look at it anyway. 11,860 of 12,000, Silas Merritt. And at dusk, while I am sitting there with a number in front of my eyes that has more digits in it than my old office made in a year, Granther comes up out of the throat on his exact minute and stands at the boundary stone with his head down. 4 pounds of moss. The facility does not care what kind of day I have had. I go and cut it in the dark with a stone flake, and he eats it and goes home. And that is the only transaction on antimony that goes the way it is supposed to go on the 21st day. 20 days of work. 1 morning to unwind it. And the part that actually hurts is not the number. The part that hurts is Ott, standing at his gate at dusk with his hat in his hands and not coming up the road. Because the arrears the world used to hold on parcel 44 are mine now, and neither of us has any idea what that makes us. Verity Calloway opens the water on the 22nd day. She does it properly. A notice on the ward channel, her own name on it, no gloating in it, anywhere. The Highmark estate has acquired the charted water of Ward 11 at public levy and will make it available to all holders at a fair rate. 2 chits the barrel at the wellhead. Bulk terms for parcels taking more than 40 barrels a term. Inquiries to the ward bank. 2 chits the barrel. A loaf of bread is 2 chits. Nobody in Ward 11 has to pay it, technically. They can haul from the windlass the way they did before I ever put a stake in the ground. 7 kilometers each way, 6 hours out of a working day, which is the reason holdings fail out here, which is the reason I made a business out of it in the first place. She has not taken anything from them. She has just put back exactly the way things were on the 7th day, and put a price on the difference. By the 24th day, there are carts on the ward road again in both directions all day long. And every holder pushing one of those carts owes their arrears to me. I want to be honest about the 2 weeks that follow, because a lot of scripts like this one skip it. There is no clever move on the 22nd day. There is no line I say to a crowd. What there is a stretch of about 5 days where I am the most hated man in the chalk marches, and I do not have any answer to it. And the reason I do not have an answer is that they are right. The arithmetic is not complicated. I hold 38,293 chits of consolidated arrears. The system takes 10% of it off me every 7 days. I cannot make 10% of 38,000 out of chalk. The only asset on the consolidated account that is worth anything is 300 parcels full of people, and the whole design of the thing, the elegant part, the part that somebody built on purpose, is that the fastest way for me to pay is to collect. That is what a bailiff is. That is where they come from. I did not understand that yet, but I could feel the shape of it that week, the way you feel a step in the dark before your foot finds it. The ward can feel it too. I go up the road on the 23rd day, and a woman at parcel 12, who paid me back in 4 days a week on a hand loom, and who cried when I signed her, takes her children inside. Not because she is afraid of me, because she does not know what I am yet, and neither do I, and she is not going to find out with her kids in the yard. At the crossroads on the 24th, the assayer weighs my hides and pays out at the same rate as anybody, and then says, not unkindly, that people are saying I planned it. That I wrote 63 instruments in a ward I knew was about to be consolidated, so that every debt in the marches would land in my hand at once. That is not true, but look at it from a cart on the ward road and tell me how you would read it. Here is what I do with the 5th day, and it is the only thing I have ever been any good at, so I do it. I take out the receipt book, I go back through every carbon, and I underwrite my own position the way I would underwrite a man walking in off the street. What do I have coming in? What is it worth? Who else has a claim on it? Assets. 1 parcel, 1.5 hectares, stripped, with a stone doorway and a root cellar that a blind pig's security interests saved from a levy. 1 crow, 1 tunneler, 1 standing facility with a lender who comes at dusk and does not take early payment. 1 skill nobody else on this world has, at credit rating B, 152 instruments performed. Liabilities. 38,293, compounding at 10% a term, which puts the minimum on the 28th day at 4,200 and change, 6 days out. Income, nothing. My receivables are gone, my water is sold, my ox is on a rope at Highmark. And 1 line in the ledger that I keep reading and putting down and picking up again, because it is the only line on the page that has any give in it. The levy took the water rights of parcel 41, 12 proven pipes, charted. I sit with that for about an hour on the evening of the 25th day, and then I go and find Sixpence, who is on the fence post, where she is always on the fence post, and I say it out loud to a bird, because there is nobody else on this hill. They took the map. They did not take the ground. Sixpence looks at me sideways with her white eyes. Minimum dewey. I know. The note comes through that night, which is how I learn that a crow will fly 7 kilometers in the dark if the last person to give her lurker fat is having a bad week. It is 1 line, in that even hand, no ruled paper this time, the back of somebody's discarded receipt. They are saying at the crossroads that you planned the consolidation. I copied all 63 of those instruments and I know what is in them, and a man who planned to take a ward does not spend his last 946 chits saving the 22 parcels with the worst arrears in it. Tell me what you need copied. SR. I read it in the dark, on a step, in front of a hole in the ground, in a ward where nobody else will look at me. You do not get many of those in either life. I write back at 4 in the morning, and my hand is worse than usual. I need 40 instruments witnessed in 6 days, and I cannot pay for a single one of them until the 8th day of the next term. I am going to borrow from things that live under the ground, and I am going to sell water that is not on anybody's chart. If I am wrong about this, you will have copied 40 pieces of paper for a man who is about to become whatever the bailiff is. The answer comes back before dawn. 40 is more copies than this house does in a month. You said that to me on the 8th day too, and then you sent me 41. Send them. SR. And that is how the second half of this starts. Not with a plan. With a bird, a bad week, and a woman I have still never seen agreeing to write down whatever I do next. The privilege has been sitting on my panel since the assize, and I have not once had a use for it. Rating B syndication permitted. A holder may pool instruments from multiple lenders under a single term and may service the aggregate interest from a single source. Pool instruments from multiple lenders. That is a sentence written by somebody who has never had to carry moss up a hill at dusk, and it means that instead of one boar, one crow, one tunneler, one note at a time, I can put my hand on 40 things in one night and hold all of it under a single running term. The problem with that idea is that I know exactly 4 creatures on antimony, and one of them has been sold to a woman on a ridge. So on the 26th day, I go down the throat past the second shelf, past the wall of tally marks, past the ledge where a lurker used to hunt bats, and I keep going. The third shelf is at 31 meters. Below it, the shaft narrows and turns and stops being a hole and starts being a country. There is a gallery down there the length of 2 football fields with a ceiling I cannot see, and the floor of it is worked. Not natural. Worked, in courses, the chalk cut in blocks and taken away, by somebody at some point for some reason, and in the middle of that floor is a colony of tunnelers. 61 of them. I count twice because the first count seems unlikely. Chalk white, knee-high, blind, every one of them a smaller and busier version of the animal currently rearranging my toolkit up on the surface. And, when my light comes over them, they do not scatter. They orient all at once. 61 blunt faces turning toward the one warm thing in the room. Tithe goes down the rope ahead of me and walks into the middle of them and starts digging a hole, because that is what Tithe does in a social situation. I get my hand on the nearest one. Proposed instrument. Lender, principal excavation, 6 hours. Interest, 30% payable in excavation or forage. Collateral, none required. Syndication available. Add lender to existing term. Add lender to existing term. I go along that gallery for 2 hours, with my hand out like a man greeting a receiving line, and I sign 61 of them, and by the end of it, the panel has stopped printing the terms individually and prints the aggregate instead. Syndicated instrument. Lenders, 61. Principal excavation, 366 lender hours per day. Interest, 900 pounds forage daily at dusk. Collateral, none required at this principal. Term, running. 900 pounds of forage a day. I sit down on a worked block of chalk in a gallery under my own parcel and I laugh. Because a month ago, the number that frightened me was 4 pounds of moss, and because 900 pounds a day is exactly the kind of number that makes a business if you can get it, and there is not 900 pounds of anything green on 1.5 hectares of bare rock. There is, however, 300 parcels of it in Ward 11. On land I hold the arrears of, worked by people who currently hate me, and who are pushing water carts 14 kilometers a day, because a woman on a ridge charges 2 chits a barrel. So I make them an offer, and I make it in public, at the crossroads, at the assayer's table, standing on a crate so that the back of the crowd can hear me, which is not a thing I have ever done in my life. Cut me forage. Anything green, anything soft, weeds, stump moss, pigweed, the stuff you burn because your goats will not eat it. Bring it to parcel 41 by dusk, and it weighs on the assayer's own scale, not mine. 10 pounds of forage buys 1 barrel of water, delivered at your gate, out of a well that will not exist for 4 days. Somebody in the back asks the question the whole crossroads is thinking, which is what happens to the arrears I hold on every one of them. They keep running, I say. I am not going to lie to you about that. 10% a term, and I cannot forgive it because I do not own it, I owe it. What I can do is stop you paying 2 chits a barrel to Highmark while you owe me, because every chit that goes north is a chit that cannot come to me, and I would rather be paid in weeds. That is not a speech. That is not stirring. Nobody cheers. 41 parcels bring forage on the first evening. By the 28th day it is 209, and there are carts backed up along my fence line at dusk with children sitting on top of green heaps, and Sixpence walks the line saying, "Min mum du" at the horses until somebody's grandmother throws a shoe at her. Here is what 900 pounds of weeds a day buys. 61 blind animals that move solid chalk like it is water, working 6 hours a day, in a country where every drop of water lies under solid chalk. The levee took my map. It could not take what the map was of, and it could not take the only man in the chalk marches who can walk a hectare barefoot and feel where the water runs, and it could not take the crow whose eyes I borrow to find the seeps or the tunneler whose sense I borrow to hear the pipes. On the 27th day, I walk parcels 12 and parcel 19 and parcel 60 barefoot in the morning cold with a borrowed sense running under my feet, and I chart new water, not the 12 pipes. The 12 pipes are Callaway's, and I would not touch them if you paid me, because the one thing a man in my position cannot afford is to be wrong on a technicality in front of a bailiff. Deeper. There is a second horizon under the first one, at 19 to 26 meters, where the chalk sits on a bed of clay, and the water runs in a sheet instead of a pipe, and it is under everything, and it is under all 300 parcels of Ward 11, and it is not on any chart in this world, because nobody has ever been able to dig 19 meters through chalk. I have 61 animals that can do it in a day and a half. The first well comes in on the 27th day at 21 meters on parcel 19, which is one of the 22 I saved at the assize, and I pick it first on purpose. 4 gallons a minute, which out here is not a well, it is an inheritance. The man who owns it stands there with his hand in the water up to the wrist and does not say anything for a long time. Every one of them goes into the register before it is dug. Location, depth, direction, my name as the charting holder, witnessed at the crossroads by a licensed scrivener who has now copied more of my handwriting than anybody alive. That is the one thing the 21st day taught me, and I am never going to unlearn it. Write it down before it exists, so that when the man with the seals comes, the page is already there and already says whose it is. 1 well in, 8 more coming, and the 28th day arrives 4 days too early, the way the 28th day always does. There is a man sitting on my boundary stone on the night of the 27th day. He is there when I come up off the rope with chalk in my hair and my light nearly out. Gray coat, the wool gone hard the same way, and a chain over the shoulder with nothing on it. You can see where the seals were. The links are worn bright in 40 or 50 places and empty in all of them. His hands are white. His face is white. His eyes are white all the way through. Tithe is sitting next to him, not near him. Next to him, against his boot, the way he sits against mine. You are the new holder of record, the man says. I am. Then I owe you 3,411 chits. He says it the way you would say the name of a town you grew up in. I have no way to pay it and no property to levy, and I am not going to insult you by pretending otherwise. I can pay you in the only thing I have, which is what I know, and I would like to start tonight, because I have not been able to say any of it out loud for 8.5 years. Halvard Wren. Halvard Wren, he agrees. I sit down on the chalk across from him, with my back against my own doorway, and I do not say anything for a while, and neither does he, and the wind comes up warm out of the throat between us. 3,000 and something, I say eventually. That is not the arrears on this parcel. This parcel was 1,700. That was the balance on the day I stopped being a holder. He almost smiles. It ran for 8.5 years while I served. Interest does not stop for service. That is the first thing, and if you take nothing else from tonight, take that one. Here is what a man tells you when he has been carrying a chain of other people's parcels for 3,142 days. You do not die on antimony when you fail. That is the part everybody assumes, and the assumption is doing a lot of work for the people who built this. You default once, they levy. You default twice, they levy harder. You default a third time, and the account is transferred to service. And service means you are given a coat and a chain and a list, and you walk out to other people's parcels and you say tender, and when they cannot tender, you take their water off the page while they watch. How many times did you do it? I ask him. 406. How many of them cried? Most of them. He looks at his empty chain. You do not stop being able to see it. That is the other thing worth knowing. They do not take that away, and I have wondered a great deal about why not, because everything else about the arrangement is efficient. The wall of tally marks on the second shelf is his. He scratched a mark a day for 8.5 years in the only place on this world that was still his own, and he stopped counting at the top of the 9th column. And when I ask him why he stopped, he says because a number you cannot pay is not a number. It is a weather. And then I ask him the question I have been carrying since the first hour of the first day, and he gives me the only piece of it he has. What is the guarantor? I never saw it, Wren says. A bailiff is shown parcels. That is the whole of what we are shown. Names, arrears, what may be levied and in what order. He turns his head toward the throat, and the white eyes do not track the way eyes track. But I served 9 wards, and every consolidated statement I ever carried had the same counterparty on the credit side, and it was never a person. It was the estate. And the estate is in arrears, holder. The world is in arrears. To somebody. To who? To whoever signed. Every account on this planet has a guarantor field, and every guarantor field is filled, and the fill is withheld, and a field that is withheld is not empty, it is protected. He leans forward. That is not mysticism, that is filing. Somebody put a name in that box, and the box has a rule on it, and rules on this world are the only honest thing there is. A guarantor is a party. A party has an account, and an account holder can be served. I do not sleep much that night. Verity Calloway comes down the Ward Road at 9 the next morning, which is the 28th day, which is a reckoning. And the timing is not an accident, because nothing she does is an accident. She does not dismount. Neither of us has ever seen the other's roof. 40,000, she says. I will take the consolidated account off you. All of it, the arrears and the holder of record, in exchange for your parcel and everything under it. You walk away clean, with nothing and no debt, which is more than anyone else in this ward will get, and I service 38,000 out of the quarry without noticing. And the terrible thing is that it is a fair offer, and it is good for the ward, and both of us know it. She can pay it. I cannot. Every 7 days that I hold this account, 10% of it comes out of 300 households who are already hauling water, and she can carry it out of petty cash for a decade and never feel it. And then you own their arrears, I say. Then I own their arrears, and I will charge them 15%, because I am not a monster, and in 9 terms I will own about 1/3 of the parcels in this ward, because that is what happens, and they will still be living on them, working for me, and they will be dry and fed, and nobody will be taken apart at dusk. She lets the reins go slack. Tell me the part of that you think is worse than what is happening now. I cannot. That is the honest answer, and I give it to her. Then why? Because you owe nothing, I say, same as the 6th day, 200 hectares, free and clear, in perpetuity. And everybody else on this rock woke up in the red, including me and including 300 people hauling barrels for you. One exception in a world made entirely out of accounts. I am not going to hand the ward to the one party the ledger does not touch. She looks at me for a long moment, and it is the only time in 50 days I ever see her genuinely reconsider something. You think that exemption is a gift, she says. You should ask what it cost. Then she straightens up, and she is a bank again. The minimum on your account this morning is 4,212 chits. You have 9 wells that are 8 days from producing, a crow and a colony of animals eating 900 pounds of weeds a day. You are 1,100 short, and we both know the arithmetic. There is exactly one asset on your book that can close it by dusk, and you have been walking past it for a week because you do not want to be the man who uses it. She turns the horse north. Use it or serve, Mr. Merritt. That is the whole of the choice, and everybody who has ever stood where you are standing has made the same one. I spend the middle of the 28th day doing the honest part, which is raising every chit that can be raised out of the ground and out of other people's wards. Ward 11 has no coin. Callaway called 210 loans on the 16th day, and every chit in this ward went north in a day and a half, and you cannot squeeze coin out of a place that has none. But Ward 9 has coin, Ward 12 has coin and an iron seam, and 40 parcels that have been drilling dry holes in chalk for 4 weeks, like men trying to find a key in a dark room. So I sell what I know. 90 chits a charted site, cash at the stake, no instrument, no term, no security, take it or leave it. I walk 11 parcels across 2 wards between 8 in the morning and 4 in the afternoon with my boots in my hand and sixpence overhead, and I chart 9 sites and get paid for 8, and one man at the Ward 12 line pays me in hides because he does not have 90 chits, and I take the hides, because the assessor takes goods at assessed value, which is half of what they are worth, which is the sentence Verity Callaway taught me on the 6th day, and has never once stopped charging me for. 810 in coin, 390 in hides, 200 from the first well on parcel 19, sold by the barrel to carts from 3 wards over, because the water is under Ward 11 but the road runs everywhere. 1,400. 1,500 with the last of the lurker fat. The minimum is 4,212. And there is exactly one asset on my book that can close it by dusk, and she was right about it, and she was right that I had been walking past it all week. I hold the arrears of 300 parcels. Here is what the panel will let me do, and I have known it for 7 days and have not once opened the page. A consolidated holder of record may enforce against the accounts assigned to him. Improvements. Stock. In the same order, in the same way, at the same hour of the same evening. What the bailiff did to me on the 21st day, I can do to Ward 11 on the 28th, and the system will help. I do it. I want to be very precise about how I do it, because this is the part of my life I have thought about most since, and the details are the only defense I have. I do not take from the 22. I do not take from any parcel that came in under the wire at the assize, and I do not take from the woman at parcel 12 with the hand loom, and I do not touch a single improvement anywhere in the ward, which means nothing gets unbuilt, which means no roof comes off in front of anybody's children. Stock only, 11 parcels, the 11 with the most stock and the least arrears, the 11 who can take it and stay standing, and I take 2,712 chits of assessed animals off them in 4 hours. And I go to every one of those 11 gates myself on foot and say it out of my own mouth. The last gate is parcel 44. Ott is standing in his yard when I come up the road, because he has watched me work my way east along the ward all afternoon, and he can count 11 goats. His arrears with me are 260. Stock is credited to the account at assessed value, which is 20 ahead for a goat worth 40 at the crossroads, and after 10 gates I am 120 short of the minimum with an hour of light left. 6 goats. He does not argue. He goes and cuts 6 out of the pen and ties them. And his wife stands in the doorway and does not come out. And he hands me the rope, and I put my hand on each animal in turn, because you never take collateral you have not touched. And I have never in my life hated a habit the way I hate that one right then. You want me to say I understand, Ott says. No. I do understand. He wipes his hands on his coat. That is the part you are not going to like. I understand it fine. You are 3,000 short and 11 of us have stock, and if you do not take it, a man in a gray coat takes your cellar, and then next term he takes mine anyway. And you were the only person in this ward who ever looked at my number before he looked at me. He looks at the goats, and I am still going to sign whatever they put in front of me at the crossroads. Because understanding a thing is not the same as being able to stand it, and I have a wife who does the arithmetic in this family, and she has already done it. I tender 4,212 chits at dusk on the 28th day. Payment received. Balance, 37,910. Account current. Thank you for your payment. We appreciate your business. Account current. 2 of the sweetest words on this world, and I stand in a field of stumps and hate them. The petition goes up at the crossroads on the 33rd day. It is drawn properly on ruled paper by a scrivener of the house, and it asks the assize of the chalk marches to remove Silas Merritt as consolidated holder of record for Ward 11 on the grounds that he has levied on the ward, and to appoint in his place a holder with the means to service the consolidated account, namely the Highmark estate, which has offered to assume it. Hearing set for the 40th day. 268 signatures out of 300 parcels. The 22 are on it. The woman with the hand loom is on it. Ott is on it, and he signed it in front of me at the assayer's table, and then shook my hand, which was worse. I go home and sit on my step, and the ward road below me is full of people carrying water out of 9 wells I charted, into houses whose arrears I hold, past a fence line where 61 blind animals get 900 pounds of weeds a night that those same people cut, and every one of them has signed a piece of paper asking a court to take me out of their lives. Wren comes up the hill at dusk and sits on the boundary stone and does not say anything for a while, which is the single most useful thing anybody does for me that week. They are not wrong, I tell him. No, he says, they are not. You took 6 goats off the only man who came to you first. He watches the road. I took a widow's rain barrels in Ward 6 in the 4th year, and she thanked me for leaving the barn. You do not get to be clean holder, you only get to be the reason something changes or the reason it does not. Say the rest of it. You cannot pay 37,900 out of chalk and weeds and 9 wells. You know that. 2 more reckonings, maybe 3 if the water scales, and you miss one, and then you miss another, and then there is a coat. He turns his white eyes on me. So you are going to have to do the other thing, and I have watched 406 people fail to think of it. Everybody pays, I say. That is all. That is the whole of it. Everybody on this rock pays every 7 days into an account that belongs to an estate that is itself in arrears, which means the estate has a creditor, and the estate has a guarantor who signed for it, and neither of them has paid 1 chit into this world since the first morning. Wren waits. So I stop trying to be a debtor who survives, I say. I have been playing the wrong side of this desk for 50 days. I am going to make the estate of antimony borrow from me. He is quiet for a long moment. They will not let you, he says. There will be a rule. There is always a rule. There is always exactly one rule, and it is always written down, and it is always the same rule. and it has been sitting in the middle of this ward since the 6th day where anybody could have read it. I do not say the rest of it out loud. Not to him, not that night, because the rest of it needs a licensed hand and a hearing and a woman who has copied more of my handwriting than anybody alive. And because I have learned one useful thing about this world from watching a bank charge 15% and a bailiff read from a page. You do not announce an instrument before it is witnessed. 11 days. 9 wells to 26, and the numbers come fast now, so I am going to give them to you fast, because the mechanics are all mechanics you already know, and the only thing that changes is the size. 61 tunnelers on a running syndicated term, 900 pounds of forage a night, cut by 209 parcels who still have my name on a petition. 26 wells on the second horizon at 19 to 26 meters, 4 gallons a minute on the poor ones, 11 on parcel 63, which comes in so hard it floods the pit and takes a tunneler with it. And I pay that colony an extra 100 pounds a day for a term as compensation, in writing, witnessed, because the day I start treating a lender as a shovel is the day this whole thing is just a rich man with animals. Water sold off Ward 11 towards 9, 10, and 12 at half of what Highmark charges. 4,100 a term by the 35th day, 6,200 by the 39th. The 35th reckoning I pay in full and then some. Balance 37,910. Interest 3,791, 41,701, minimum 4,170. I tender 6,000. Payment received. Balance 35,701. Notes performed 400. Credit rating B to A. Rating A. And under it the privilege that I have been walking towards since a chalk white man sat on my boundary stone and said the word party. An instrument may be drawn against an estate. An estate is a party. An instrument drawn against an estate must be recorded at a sitting of the assize, and perfected by disclosure of all parties bound. Perfected by disclosure of all parties bound. I read that line about 40 times over 3 days, and then I sit down with Wren on the boundary stone with the receipt book on my knee, and we build the thing, and it takes us 4 nights. And the reason it takes 4 nights is that I keep trying to be clever, and he keeps telling me that clever is what gets a man a coat. The trap is that I cannot pay 35,000. I have known that since the 21st day. Nobody in the history of antimony has ever paid out of arrears, because the interest is faster than the chalk, and that is not a flaw in the design. That is the design. But an estate in arrears has the same problem, at a size nobody has ever looked at. The estate of antimony owes somebody. The consolidated statement said so on the 12th day, in a header nobody reads. Account the estate of antimony, status, in arrears. 12,000 holders on this world are servicing an estate that is itself behind on a bigger account. And the entire apparatus, the reckonings, the levies, the coats, all of it, is one enormous collection operation running to pay somebody else's minimum. So I am not going to ask the world for mercy. I am going to do the only thing I have ever known how to do to a party that is behind on a payment, which is to offer it terms. Principle. The second horizon. Every meter of charted water under Ward 11, 26 wells in the sheet they draw on, an asset that did not exist on any register in this world until I walked 300 parcels barefoot in the cold, assessed by the clerk of the assize at 61,400 chits. Borrower, the estate of antimony. Term, perpetual. Interest, the consolidated arrears of Ward 11 are restructured to the value of the security, and the balance is discharged. Security, the estate's receivable, the advance. 500 chits paid out to 12,000 holders on the first morning of the world, and every chit of it drawn against a party whose name is in a box that this world has never once opened. And to take security over that receivable, the system has to tell me who signed it. They will not stand for it, Ren says, on the fourth night. They will have to record it. That is what a clerk is. And then they will do everything they can to make you default before it perfects. He is quiet a moment. There is an acceleration clause on consolidated accounts. I have carried it twice. It is not used often because it is not usually needed. What does it do? It calls the whole balance, not the minimum. The balance on the hour, and every hour you do not tender is a default, and 3 defaults is a coat. He looks at the throat. You would have to stay current, hour by hour, on 35,701 chits, for as long as it takes the paper to perfect. How long does perfection take? I have never seen an instrument against an estate, Ren says. Nobody has. There has never been a holder at rating A in the 9 advances I know of, because the ones who get that far take the coat first. The Sisais sits on the 40th day to hear a petition to remove me as holder of record of Ward 11, brought by 268 of the 300 people whose water I am currently drilling. I am going to be there anyway. It is, when you think about it, the only sitting of the Assize I am ever going to be invited to. The Assize convenes by the pool at the windlass at first light on the 40th day, and half the chalk marches comes to watch, because a removal is better entertainment than an auction. The clerk sets his table on the stone rim. 268 signatures go on the table in front of him in a roll. Verity, Calloway stands to the clerk's right with her factors and her ring of keys, in the green coat, and the Highmark offer to assume the consolidated account sits on the table already, drawn and witnessed and perfect, because she has never once in 50 days brought an unfinished document into a room. And behind the clerk there is a screen, and behind the screen are the licensed hands of the crossroads, because that is how the trade works and has always worked. The clerk opens by calling the witness to the instruments in question. Since the petition turns on paper I wrote, and paper that was copied, and an assize may compel attestation in person. The screen moves. She is shorter than the hand made me expect, which is a stupid thing to be surprised by, and I am surprised by it anyway. Slate blue, hood down on her shoulders, dark hair cut short and going every direction because she has been at a desk since 4. A copyist's board strapped to her left forearm, worn shiny in the middle. A bandolier of little glass ink bottles across her chest. 4 of them, all different colors, all stoppered. A wax matrix on a cord at her throat. And ink to the second knuckle of her right hand, and a white scar across the back of it. And I have been looking at that hand come out of a brass slot in a green door for 32 days. Sabine Roque, she tells the clerk. License at the windlass. I copied and witnessed every instrument this ward is arguing about, and I would like it on the record that I have never once been paid in advance for any of them. Somebody at the back laughs. She does not look at me. She will not look at me for another 11 minutes, and when she finally does, it is over the top of a document, which is, I think, exactly right. The petition is read out. It takes a while. It says what it says. Then the clerk asks whether the holder of record wishes to be heard, and I stand up, and the crossroads goes quiet in the way a crowd goes quiet when it thinks it is about to watch a man beg. The petition is good, I say. I levied on 11 parcels in this ward on the 28th day and took 136 head of stock at assessed value, and 6 of them off a man who was the first person on this world to trust me with anything. I am not going to stand here and tell you that was justified. It was arithmetic, and arithmetic is what has been done to every single person under this awning since the first morning, and I did it because it was done to me 9 days earlier. I look at Ott, who is in the 3rd row, and who has not been able to look at anything but his own hands since the reading started. If this ward wants Highmark to hold its arrears instead of me, that is the ward's business, and I will sign the transfer myself. But a holder of record has a right to file before he is removed. and I am going to use it, because after today I will not have it. I put the instrument on the table. The clerk reads it. He reads it twice. Then he calls for the assessor, which he does not have to do, and the assessor comes and reads it, and the two of them have a conversation in low voices that goes on, long enough that Calloway walks over and reads it upside down off the table, which is the first ungoverned thing I have ever seen her do. Principal, the clerk says, at last to the crowd, because he is required to state the substance. The charted water of the second horizon under Ward 11. 26 wells and the bearing sheet they draw upon at 19 to 26 meters, recorded to the charting holder before excavation in every case. He looks up, assessed at 61,400 chits. The number goes across that crossroads like cold water. Borrower, the clerk says, the estate of antimony. Calloway says quietly, you cannot lend to the world. Why not? Because it is the world. It is an estate, I say. It has a name on a statement. It has an account. It is in arrears, and it has been collecting from every person here for 40 days to service somebody else's minimum. It is the biggest debtor in this room and the only one nobody has ever offered terms. I turn to the clerk. Is the estate a party? The clerk does not want to answer that question. He answers it because he is a clerk, and because the answer is printed in his own book. The estate is a party. Calloway tries 3 objections, and every one of them is good. She says a holder cannot convey what he does not own, and the clerk reads out 26 registration entries with my name in the charting line, each one recorded before a shovel went in. And I think of the 21st day, and of a chalk white man taking 12 pipes off my page because they were on a chart with my name on it, and I want to laugh, and I do not. She says the security is void because you cannot take security over an advance that has already been paid out. The clerk says an advance paid out is a receivable, and a receivable is property, and property may be encumbered. She says, last, and she says it looking at me, and not at the clerk, that no instrument in the history of the 9 advances has ever been drawn against the estate, and that there is a reason for that, and that the reason is not going to be a pleasant discovery for anybody standing on this stone. That is not an objection, the clerk says. That is advice. He puts his seal on it. Sabine Roque copies it out fair at the table in 11 minutes with 200 people watching her hand move, and she signs it, and she looks up at me over the top of it and says the first words she has ever said to my face. Your handwriting is still terrible. I know. I am staking my license on this. I know that too. She stamps the wax, and the world answers. Instrument recorded. Lender, Silas Merritt, parcel 41. Borrower, the estate of antimony. Security, the advance of the 9th 12,000 subscriptions, 500 chits each. The panel stops. I have seen it hesitate exactly once before, on the 7th day, when I tendered a lurker hide against a minimum I had no business making. This is not that. This is a page that does not want to turn. Perfection of security requires disclosure of all parties bound. Guarantor of the advance of the 9th, withheld. Application for disclosure is recorded. Disclosure pending. And then, in the same flat voice, with no change at all, the way the worst things always arrive on this world. Consolidated account, Ward 11. Holder of record, Silas Merritt. Acceleration is invoked. The balance is called in full. 35,701 chits, due upon the hour and upon each hour thereafter until discharged. Failure to tender constitutes default. 2 defaults remain. Service commences upon 3rd default. We appreciate your business. Nobody at the crossroads moves. Out on the North Road, where the ridge comes down to the water track, there are 3 figures in gray coats walking this way in step, and the sound they make carries a long distance in flat country, because each of them is wearing a chain of other people's parcels. Here is what acceleration means in practice, and I want it on the record because I have thought about it more than anything else that happened to me on antimony. It does not mean they come and take everything. They could have done that on the 21st day. It means the account is called in full on the hour, and every hour I cannot tender. The full balance is a default, and I have 2 defaults left before a man hands me a coat and a chain and a list. 2 hours. That is the whole of it. 35,701 chits in 2 hours, in a ward with no coin, on a world where I am the largest debtor anybody has ever heard of. I tender at the first hour. Everything. 6,200 in coin off the water, the stock I hold, the hides, the receipt book itself for whatever the assessor will call it, and the assessor calls the lot at 7,180. Tender insufficient. First default recorded under acceleration. 2 defaults remain. 2 remain because the 21st day already ate one, and I have about 55 minutes. And Halvard Wren, who has been standing at the edge of the crowd with his empty chain and his hands in his sleeves, walks up to the clerk's table and says, in the voice of a man who carried this book for 8.5 years and never once got to use it on his own side, an hour does not close while an assessment is open. The clerk looks at him. Levy procedure, Wren says. 19th clause. Goods tendered in kind must be assessed before they are credited, and the hour of tender is the hour the goods are received, and the account does not fall due while a tender is under assessment. He turns to the crossroads, and 200 people who have spent 40 days learning to hate me. 1 item at a time, and assessed individually. Nobody hurries a clerk. Ott is first in the line. He does not say anything to me. He walks up to the table with 5 goats on a rope, the 5 he has left, and he puts the rope in the assessor's hand, and he says, loud enough for the back, 1 head, assess it. And when the assessor writes down 20 and reaches for the second, Ott says, 1 head, assess it, and the clerk understands what is happening about 4 seconds before Verity Calloway does. The woman from parcel 12 puts her hand loom on the table. 1 loom, assess it. I need to stop here and explain why any of these people are standing in this queue, because 268 of them signed a paper 8 days ago asking a court to take me out of their lives, and a crowd does not turn around because a man made a speech at a hearing. It turned around before the hearing, and it turned around for a reason I had nothing to do with. Ott's wife read the register. Her name is Marin. She does the arithmetic in that family, and she had never once spoken to me. On the 36th day, she walked the 7 kilometers to the windlass, paid a scrivener of the house 3 chits out of her own purse for a copy of the water register for Ward 11, walked home and read it at her table with a candle. What is in that register is 11 entries. The same 11 parcels I levied on the 28th day, each one carrying a standing credit against water at the wellhead, in the exact assessed amount of the stock I took off it. 2,712 chits of goats and sheep and 1 mule, coming back a barrel at a time, at a rate that would have run about 4 terms. I did not announce it, and the reason is not modesty. A man who takes 6 goats off you and then tells you about the credit he quietly wrote is a man asking to be thanked for the goats. I would rather have been hated accurately. She put the copy on the assayer's table, at the crossroads on the 37th day, where everybody drinks, and stood next to it while 40 people read it, and said 1 sentence that somebody repeated to me later, and that I have never been able to get all the way through out loud. He was paying it back the whole time, and letting us think he wasn't. And 2 days after that, the well on parcel 63 came in at 11 gallons a minute and flooded its own pit in under a minute with a tunneler at the bottom of it. Blind, 15 pounds, 19 meters down, in water going up faster than a man can climb. I was 4 parcels away with my boots in my hand, and I organized none of it. 11 people went down that shaft on a rope in relay in the dark, and the man who owns 63 went first, and he had signed the petition on the first line. They got the animal out at 22 minutes. It lay on the chalk and coughed like a dog, and then dug a hole and sat in it, which is what they do when they have had enough of everybody, and 40 people stood around a hole in the ground at midnight, applauding a mole. None of that took the petition off the table. 268 signatures were still 268 signatures, and the hearing still sat. But it is why there is a queue at 5 in the morning, and it is why the queue holds. The syndicate from the North Road brings cut stone, and they bring it 1 block at a time on a barrow, and each block is a tender, and each tender is an assessment, and there are 90 blocks. Somebody's grandmother tenders a wheel of cheese and then argues about the assessment for 11 minutes, which is not procedure, which is just her, and which is worth more to me that night than the cheese. The hour does not close. They keep it open for 14 hours. I want to say that plainly because the mechanics of it are not heroic and the doing of it was. 281 households, a queue along the stone rim of the pool that is still there at 3 in the morning by lamplight, 1 item at a time, cheese and stone, and copper wire, and boots and a brass weight, and 406 separate small things, and every one of them assessed and written into the record by hand. And the hand is Sabine's, because the clerk's own copyists give out at midnight, and she does not. They come at her license at the 9th hour. It is not Calloway. I want to be fair about that, because I watched her face when it happened, and she was not expecting it either. It is the Scrivener house, which has spent 40 days being leaned on by the largest borrower on its copy roll, and has learned to guess what the leaning wants. Their senior hand files a challenge with the clerk at 10 past midnight. A licensed attestation is void, where the attesting hand holds an interest in the matter attested, and Sabine Roque is owed copy fees by the party tendering, and has been owed them by her own statement at this table since the 8th day. If it holds, every receipt she has written since 5 in the afternoon is void, and the 14 hours are void with them, and the hour closes on the spot. The queue goes quiet all the way down the pool. I have 311 chits in my hand. It is what is left after the first tender, and it is the only coin on this crossroads that is still mine, and it is going into the next tender because everything is going into the next tender. I put it on the clerk's table instead. Copy fees in full from the 8th day to this hour. 311 chits at 3 a copy, 103 copies, with the balance to her account for the ones she has not billed me for, because she never bills me for anything. I look at the senior hand of the house, who is a decent enough man having a bad night on somebody else's instructions. She holds no interest. Paid in front of the clerk, witnessed by 200 people, recorded. Interest extinguished, the clerk says. Attestation stands. Sabine does not thank me. She turns the page over, dips the pen, and says, without looking up, "You have just handed away 311 chits of a tender you cannot make." I have handed away 311 chits of a tender I was never going to make. The tender is not the point. The hour is the point. Then stop standing there and call them out to me. You are slower than the grandmother. So that is how we spend the rest of the night, and it is the closest thing to a fight scene this part of the story has. I work the front of the queue and she works the table. I take the item, I say what it is and whose it is, and she writes it, and the assessor calls the number, and she writes that, and Sixpence takes the copy up the road at 9 minutes a leg, and none of the 3 of us stops moving for 5 hours. 1 hand loom, parcel 12, assessed 40. 1 barrow of cut stone, North Syndicate, assessed 9. 1 brass weight, 1 copper pot, 1 iron chain, 11 links, assessed 6. 1 coat which I refuse, and the man argues, And she writes it down anyway because a refused tender is still an entry. And an entry is still an open assessment. And I look at her when she does that, and she does not look back. And I understand that she has been 3 moves ahead of the whole crossroads since 10 past midnight. At about 4 in the morning, she runs out of the black ink and switches to the brown one on the bandolier without breaking rhythm, and says to the page, "This is the worst night of my professional life." She says. Sixpence works the road all night with folded receipts in her feet. 9 minutes each way. She says the line at the table about once an hour, and by 2 in the morning half the queue says it back to her. The bailiffs arrive at parcel 41 at the 5th hour, because they are not stupid, and because the one thing that ends a tender queue is taking the thing being tendered against. There are 3 of them, gray coats, chains, white eyes, and they come up my ward road in step to levy improvements, which is the only thing left on my parcel that has any assessed value at all. Wren told me what they would do, and in what order, and I built the night around it. The first one gets 9 meters up the track before the ground goes out from under him. 61 tunnelers have been under that road since dusk. Not a trap and not a pit, just chalk with nothing left in it, and he goes down to the chest and the seals on his chain sound like a dropped tray. The second one comes around the west side, through the stumps, and Granther is in the stumps. I do not watch that part, I hear it. A blind boar the size of a car does not charge. He arrives, and there is a sound like a door coming off a truck, and then there is a gray coat in the thorn 40 feet away not getting up quickly. The third one stops at the boundary stone. He stands there for a long time with the parcel in front of him, and my cellar door 6 meters away, and the whole thing available to him, and he does not cross, and it takes me until dawn to understand why. And the reason is the same reason I am still on this rock at all. Improvements on parcel 41 are pledged as collateral under a standing facility. Lender, Karspor, mature, blind. Recorded on the 9th day. Secured notes take priority over ground rent. He cannot levy them. He could not levy them on the 21st day, and he cannot levy them now. And the animal that holds that security is at this moment standing in the thorn with a bailiff's coat under 1 foot. And I am fairly sure the 2 facts are not related, and I am never going to be certain. The 10th hour, the 12th. At some point around 2 in the morning, Verity Calloway comes and stands next to me at the end of the pool, away from the lamps, and watches a man tender a chair. "You are not going to make it," she says. "Do you know that? 14 hours of goats and cheese is 9,000 chits, and the balance is 35. You are not paying it off. You are only holding the hour open." "I know." "Then, what are you buying?" "Time for a page to turn," I say. She looks at the queue for a while. "When I was granted Highmark," she says, "the system read my name to 12,000 people and told them I would never owe anyone anything, and then it said one more line to me privately, and I have never repeated it to a living soul." She pulls her gloves straight. It said, "Exemptions are drawn on the same account as everything else." Meaning what? Meaning I have wondered for 40 days who is paying for me. She turns to go back to her factors. "If your page turns, Holder, I would like to see it." The 14th hour ends at 18 minutes past 5 in the morning, when the last item in the queue is assessed. It is a child's carved wooden goat, tendered by a boy of about 9, and the assessor writes it down at 1 chit, and there is nothing behind it in the line, and the hour closes. Tender total, 14th hour, 9,462. Balance under acceleration, 19,059. Tender insufficient, second default recorded. The crossroads makes a sound I have never heard a crowd make. 1 default remains. And then the sun comes up over the chalk marches, and the page turns. Application for disclosure matured. Perfection of security in progress. Guarantor of the advance of the 9th is disclosed as follows. 200 people at a crossroads stop breathing at the same time. I have never been in a place that quiet, and I stood in a hospice once at 4 in the morning, and I stood in a courtroom while a jury came back. Guarantor of the advance of the 9th, the holders of record of the 8th advance jointly and severally. Status, in service, accruing. Nobody says anything, because for about 4 seconds nobody understands it, and then Ren makes a sound I am not going to try to write down. The people of the world before this one signed for us. All of them. Every holder of the 8th, every man and woman who woke up on some other rock with a parcel and a talent, and 500 chits and a bill coming in 6 days, put their name jointly and severally against the money that was handed to 12,000 strangers on the first morning of antimony. They are the reason there was anything here to receive. And they did not pay it off, because nobody pays it off, because the interest is faster than the chalk. And so every one of them is in service, and has been in service since before this world existed, and their balances are still running while they serve. That is what a bailiff is. That is what the coats are. That is what has been walking up my ward road, with a chain of parcels on its shoulder and white eyes that have not seen daylight in a very long time. Halvard Wren has been on his knees on the stone rim for a while now, and the reason is not the disclosure. The reason is the next line, and he saw it coming a full second before it printed, because he has read more consolidated statements than any living thing on this planet. The holders of record of the 9th advance stand as guarantor of record for the advance of the 10th, jointly and severally, subscription irrevocable. 12,000 people on a chalk plateau, who have spent 40 days arguing about goats, have already co-signed for a world that has not been handed out yet. I have questions. I have about 900 of them, and I am going to spend the rest of my life on them. And the system answers exactly none, because a clerk discloses what is required to perfect a security, and not one word more. Who lends the advances? What the return is supposed to be? What the estate spent 36 million chits on a world where the best asset anybody has found in 40 days is water at 19 meters. Where the 10th is being subscribed, and what it looks like, and whether there is a man standing on it right now reading a statement with a minus sign in front of it. Withheld, withheld, withheld. But the security perfects. That is the part that matters at 18 minutes past 5 in the morning on the 41st day. Security perfected. Instrument stands against the estate of antimony. Principal, the second horizon, Ward 11, assessed 61,400. Secured notes take priority over ground rent. 11 words that a woman I had never met posted on the ward channel on the 6th night, back when I was a man with a hole in the ground and a bird. Consolidated arrears, Ward 11, are restructured to the value of the security. Balance discharged. Acceleration withdrawn. Defaults under acceleration vacated. Discharged. 300 parcels. 39,600 chits on the night of the consolidation, 19,059 by 5 in the morning on the 41st day, after a ward emptied its houses onto a clerk's table one item at a time, and all of it, every remaining chit of it, gone in a single line. And under it, so small that I nearly miss it, the account that started all of this on a rock in a field of stumps. Parcel 41, the arrears, balance, nil. 58 chits in 20 days. That was my rate. That was what a man could do out here, with a stone flake and torn hands and a blind pig. And at that rate, the 1,700 that Halvard Wren left on this dirt comes clear somewhere around my 50th birthday. Nil because the world took a loan from a bail bondsman and pledged the only thing it had. The queue at the pool does not cheer. That is not what happens. What happens is that a lot of people who have not slept sit down where they are standing, and the boy with the wooden goat asks his mother a question, and somebody starts laughing and cannot stop. And Ott walks over to the assessor's table and gets his 5 goats back because a discharged tender is reversed. Like he has never seen a goat before them. Like he has never seen a goat before. I get the 6 back to him by noon. He tries to argue about it. His wife does not. Verity Calloway signs at 11 in the morning, at the same table, in front of everybody, and it is the single most satisfying quarter hour of my life. Her quarry cuts stone with water. It always has. 900 barrels a term to run the saws and settle the dust, and she has been drawing it out of 12 charted pipes on the first horizon, which is a shallow seasonal thing that was always going to fall away in the dry, and which is now sitting above 26 wells drawing on the sheet beneath it. Her water is not gone. Her water is thin and getting thinner, and she is a woman who can read a curve. She comes to the table and asks for terms. 20%, I say. You charged this ward 20% when you were the worst credit on the board. I did. And now you are the best credit on the board, and you are still charging 20. You are getting the same rate as the woman at parcel 12, I say. That is either the fairest thing anybody has ever offered you or the rudest, and I genuinely do not mind which one you write down. She almost smiles. The security is Highmark. 200 hectares of old pine and 1 working quarry, and she does not blink at that either, because she has known since the 40th day exactly how this goes, and she is too good at this to pretend otherwise. Her grant was free and clear in perpetuity, and no ground rent shall attach, and the system read those words to 12,000 people on the first morning, and they mean precisely what they say, and nothing else. Ground rent is one thing. A private instrument between 2 holders is another thing entirely, and it is the thing I have been writing since a Gothard walked down a fence line on the 5th day. She puts her name on it. Sabine copies it fair and witnesses it. The system records it. Instrument recorded. Holder to holder. Principal, water 900 barrels per term. Interest 20%. Secured, the Highmark Estate, Ward 11, the Chalk Marches. An S rank on the first page of the leaderboard, with a grant no rule on this world could touch, owing water to a man who arrived here with a stopped watch and a receipt book. She is done brought down from the ridge that afternoon. I did not ask. He comes down the ward road on a rope behind one of her factors, stops dead 20 meters from my boundary stone, and will not move another step until somebody puts a fistful of moss in his mouth, and the factor stands there for 4 minutes because nobody at Highmark ever wrote that down. Halvard Wren is the last item of business, and it is the one I have been putting off since the 27th night, because there is no clean way to do it. He owes me 3,411 chits. That is not a debt he ran up. It is the balance on a parcel he lost 8.5 years ago, compounded through every day he spent walking other people's ward roads taking their rain barrels, because a world he never met signed a piece of paper before he was ever born. I cannot forgive it. I have said that to this ward twice, and it is still true, because a consolidated holder does not own the arrears, he carries them, and the only thing I can actually do with a balance is restructure it. So I restructure it. Principal 3,411. Term, perpetual. Interest, 1 chit per term, payable in the only currency this lender has, which is what he knows. Security, none required at this principal. Instrument recorded. Holder to holder. Wren reads it 4 times, which I have noticed is the number of times he reads anything that matters, and then he asks me what the work is. You carried a chain for 8.5 years, I say. You know the levy order, the clause numbers, the assessment rules, and what a bailiff can and cannot do at a boundary stone. There are 281 households in this ward who are about to start writing paper for the first time in their lives, and every one of them is going to get it wrong. You want me to clerk. I want you to be the man in the room who has read the whole document, I say. It is not a coat. You can quit on an hour's notice and nobody will come up the road about it. He puts his hand flat on the table for a second, the way I put mine on lenders, and I do not think he knows he does it. 1 chit a term, he says. I have been carrying 3,411 for 8.5 years, and you have made it 1 chit a term. You have been carrying it at 10% a term. That is what did it, not the principle. Nobody on this world has ever been killed by a principle. The leaderboard refreshes at dusk on the 41st day, and it does something it has not done once in 41 days, which is hesitate. The board counts what you hold. It has counted paper since the first morning, because paper is what people hold out here, and I am now the party with a perfected security interest over the advance of the 9th. 12,000 subscriptions at 500 chits. 6 million. 1 of 12,000. Silas Merritt, net worth, assessment pending. I have never seen those 2 words on that board next to anybody. Verity Calloway is second with a number, the way everybody has always had a number, and she held the top of it for 50 days. When I look up, she is on the Ward Road on the gray horse watching me read it, and she inclines her head maybe half an inch and rides north. Sabine finds me at the end of the pool while the lamps are going out. The house rule about clients, she says. It was never about clients. It was about the Ward Bank, and the Ward Bank is now the largest borrower on my copy roll. She has her board strapped to her arm and ink on her hand, and she is not looking at me again. I am opening my own hand. At the windlass on the north side where the road comes down. You will need volume. I will need volume, she agrees. She says. That is it. That is the entire romantic climax of 41 days. And if you were expecting more, I would gently point out that we had spoken face to face for a total of about 6 minutes at that point, and both of us had been awake for 30 hours. I go home at dusk. Granther comes up out of the throat on his exact minute and takes his 4 pounds of moss, and does not care about any of it. Tithe has stolen and buried the clerk's spare pen, which is going to be a whole thing tomorrow. Sixpence sits on the fence post and says the line at nobody in particular. And then, at full dark, on the 41st day of the first term of the 9th advance, my panel opens one more time, and it is not a statement. Notice to all holders of record. The 9th advance approaches term. Advance 10. Subscription opens in 90 days. Guarantor of record, the holders of the 9th advance jointly and severally. Subscriptions are irrevocable. We appreciate your business. 90 days. And down in the throat, on the second shelf, on a wall of dressed chalk where a man scratched a mark a day for 3,142 days, and then stopped, there is a fresh mark this morning. Wren did not make it. He has been at the crossroads with me for 2 days, and he has not been down there in 8.5 years, and I take a lamp down at midnight and stand in front of it with my heart, going and count the 9th column twice. 3,143. Somebody is still counting. Somebody has been counting the whole time, in the dark, under my parcel, on the other side of a wall that somebody cut in courses and carried away. And the warm air comes up out of the deep gallery past my face and smells of chalk and old water, and I stand there with my hand flat on the stone the way I have put my hand on every lender on this world. Nothing offers me terms. Not yet.